Now, AI is helping experts decipher ancient tablets in search of gaps in the Epic of Gilgamesh. We'll discuss it with GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen, host of The Culture Show. He'll also talk about some contemporary works like Banksy's Tagging London and the mysterious artist's latest stunt. All that ahead on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump will hold a rally in Asheville, North Carolina today. It's just a few days before the Democrats open their national convention in Chicago. As NPR's Danielle Kurtzleben reports, the former president plans to focus on the U.S. economy.
In announcing the rally, the Trump campaign emphasized Social Security and Medicare, promising to protect and improve those programs if reelected. Asheville is known for being liberal, but it's located within a sea of much more conservative counties, and it's also a short drive for some voters from red states like Tennessee and South Carolina. At a press conference last week, Trump seemed to say he would wait to campaign more heavily after the DNC. But Trump has now also announced a Saturday rally in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and his running mate, J.D. Vance, is set to speak in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin in the coming days. Danielle Kurtzleben, NPR News.
Consumer prices eased a little bit in July, according to new data from the Labor Department. The annual inflation rate rose 2.9% last month. That's the lowest monthly rate reported in more than 3 years. Most of that increase is due to rising housing costs. Energy prices were flat. Hamas says it will not send representatives to ceasefire talks that are supposed to open tomorrow in either Qatar or Egypt. A Hamas spokesman says the group wants Israel to commit to a ceasefire proposal that was discussed last month and based on President Biden's vision. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has blamed Hamas for obstructing negotiations. The governor of the western Russian border region, Belgorod, has declared a state of emergency. Vyacheslav Gladkov blames shelling by Ukraine. The Belgorod region is next to the Russian region of Kursk. Ukrainian troops have been advancing there, too. Governor Gladkov described conditions in his region as heard here through a BBC interpreter.
The situation in our Belgorod region continues to remain extremely difficult and tense. Daily shelling from the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed houses, wounded and dead civilians. Therefore, we are making a decision from today throughout the Belgorod region to protect the population and provide additional measures of support to victims by declaring an emergency at the regional level.
Russia says overnight it destroyed more than 100 Ukrainian drones and 4 incoming missiles. The National Hurricane Center says Tropical Storm Ernesto has now become a hurricane. Its top sustained winds are at 75 miles per hour. It's brushing by Puerto Rico. It's drenching the island and the neighboring Virgin Islands with torrential rain. Flash flood warnings are up for parts of Puerto Rico. Some areas could get up to 6 inches of rain or more. Rivers are overflowing. On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up nearly 77 points. You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Craig Lamolt. Unionized medical workers protested last night outside a Department of Public Health hearing on the impending shutdown of Kearney Hospital in Dorchester at the end of the month. Nurses aide Beverly Lawler says she's 1 year away from retirement with a husband who's disabled and in need of regular medical care. She says she's scared to lose her income and her health insurance.
At the end of the month, I'm going to be out of a job. He doesn't have a doctor. No, we don't know where to go.
Steward Executive Octavio Paz said at the hearing that the closure was unavoidable. He says they're working to transfer patients to new facilities.
I trust that the many hospitals around the Dorchester community will continue to serve the patients of this resilient community.
Governor Maura Healey has repeatedly said she does not have the power to keep Kearney open. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz will be in Boston today, a week after being tapped as Vice President Kamala Harris's running mate in the Democratic presidential ticket. Walz kicked off his first solo campaign events yesterday in Los Angeles. He's set to speak at a reception at a hotel in Back Bay today, with attendants spending $25,000 to get in, at the top suggested donation of $100,000. The Globe reports the event raised over $1 million as of last night. The next stop for Walz is tomorrow in Newport, Rhode Island. Sunny today with a high in the mid-80s, a slight chance of showers tonight and lows in the 60s. Tomorrow, temperatures in the 80s, a chance of showers in the afternoon, and Friday looks mostly sunny with a high in the low 80s. Right now, it looks like Saturday's partly sunny with a high in the low 80s and maybe some showers on Sunday. At Fenway tonight, Red Sox look to sweep the Rangers in a 3-game series. The game starts at 6:10.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include EBSCO, offering clinical decision support resources and tools, including disease and condition content from Dynamed and drug information from Meridiv. Learn more at dynamedx.com.
Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com. Thank you /GBH News. We'll be back here on Friday. Good morning, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
So there's plenty of talk about in the news today. Inflation numbers are out this morning, below 3% for the first time since peak COVID. A recent survey shows people are generally more optimistic about the economy. We were also going to ask you about all that, plus the overtly racist messaging coming out of the Trump campaign. I don't know if you've seen this latest on social media. He's comparing Trump neighborhoods, as he describes them, with Harris neighborhoods, which is absolutely nauseating. But it's the middle of August, so we decided instead we should talk about tomatoes. That's right. Really, it's prime time. They're having a bit of a moment. Tomato-scented soap and candles. I'm not into that. Not to mention the beauty of the unadulterated fruit itself. Cherry tomato picked right off from the vine in your driveway container garden. An heirloom sliced thinly with some salt and mayo slapped between 2 pieces of white bread. Maybe some balsamic and mozzarella for a caprese, or at peak ripeness, a nice simmering Sunday sauce. Or for some of you, no tomatoes at all. The number is 877, including Tom Brady. The number is 877-301-8970. We're asking you about the tomato and you. And while we're at it, can anyone please tell me what an heirloom tomato actually is and why it's so superior to the garden variety, which it is, at 877-301-8970. Now, you're a big tomato woman.
Here's the thing, Jim.
What is it?
We just got through with the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
And after all the depressing politics and all the depressing stories, it was a pause and a salute to excellence.
It was.
And now here we are with our salute to the excellence
of the tomato
or tomato in August. I mean, they really are the best. You don't want to eat them in the wintertime.
Nope.
They're never very good in the wintertime. And the ones you get in the supermarket generally aren't very big because they're very good because they're built to sustain shipping, and that's not very good. This is the time, thin skin, slice those babies up. It's a salute to the excellence.
You're thin-skinned, I can see that. Now, let me ask you something.
Well, not compared to somebody else.
Okay, maybe so. So, first of all, what is an heirloom tomato?
Well, an heirloom tomato...
No, I don't want you reading this. You're a tomato woman.
I don't know that much about
it.
I see them a lot in the stores, and
yes,
sometimes I buy them, and they're usually very good. Actually, Jim, they're kind of like daughters of the American Revolution.
What does that mean?
Well, they come from seeds that have a history of being passed down with the family or community. You know, they've been here for a long time, like the generational sharing.
Oh, like an heirloom.
That's right, of jewelry or furniture.
Huh.
The tomato should date back to pre-1950. You know why?
No.
Because they began the hybridization of tomatoes in the 1950s.
You know, one of the things, you know why I actually I didn't like tomatoes growing up. I'm sure you're interested to know that. One of the reasons why I love an August kind of tomato, I think Massachusetts' peak season is August, end of September, something like that.
Mid-July to September.
Okay, mid-July, you're right. The reason why they're so good is not just because they're so good, even though I never appreciated it as a kid, but they're so good because the off-season ones are so bad.
That's right.
And I grew up with only the off-season ones. I mean, I don't even know what an heirloom tomato was till I got 10 years ago. And the contrast is so dramatic that it increases the beauty of the flavor. Not to mention the fact, are heirloom tomatoes beautiful to look at?
They are beautiful to look at. And the big, fat, juicy ones are beautiful to look at. You go to the farm stands and buy them. That's what you want to do. But the Globe interviews these two people their whole thing, this Langwater farm in Northeastern and then this Wardsbury farm in Sharon, where they describe how they have to grow the tomato to get them to come out exactly the way they want.
Oh, what do they say?
Did you know that the annual Best Tomato Contest is next week?
No.
August 20, it's the 38th No, it's going to be the 39th
Wow.
annual contest.
Wow.
And people, they score slicing cherry, heirloom, and heaviest tomatoes. And this
Why do we care about that exactly?
Because it'd be fun to go to the annual
going to
tomato.
it?
Well, I got to find out exactly where it is.
Where
I'm
is
not
it?
Really, I don't know.
Okay.
It's somewhere up there. Oh, it might be in Northeastern.
It might not
Which
be.
is not that
though.
far. No, excuse me.
Yeah.
I'm wrong. The 2024 contest will be held next week right here in Boston at the Boston Public Market, Tuesday, August 20th.
How many people are going to the tomato festival? Okay. You are. Thank you. Okay. That was 1.5 people. 877-301-8970. Before we take your calls on tomatoes, can you bear with me because I just have to get this out of my system?
You should describe this picture.
I'm going to do this, and I'm going to take a deep breath.
Okay.
I think we know that Donald Trump deals in racism whenever he has an opportunity. Right. And it's hard to say that anything with Donald Trump is a new low, but if there is such a thing as a new low, this is it. There's this meme, this graphic. On the left-hand side is a photograph. It says, your neighborhood under Trump. And it's like, I don't know, like a small town brick house.
A nice brick house.
With an American flag.
White porch with a little balustraded little wrapper around the porch. Nice American flag. All the bushes are well kept. The grass is well kept. Right.
And the right-hand sign is your neighborhood, not under the vice president or Harris, but Kamala, of course. He calls her by her first name, at least. Well, there's no pronunciation here. And it is exclusively people of color trying to, packed in huge numbers, trying to get over a fence. I assume it's an immigration photograph. But it is, someone on CNN last night compared it to Willie Horton. Willie Horton obviously was the photograph of the man who went on furlough and did horrible things, which many people believe sunk the Dukakis campaign. I should say, by the way, the most important part of Willie Horton is it was not started by George H.W. Bush like all of you think. The first person to mention Willie Horton was Al Gore, actually, in the primary against a fellow Democrat, against Mike Dukakis. Willie Horton can't hold a candle to the grotesque racism here. And we're not going to do it today, but it's someday before the week is over. I'd like those of you who call who are Trump supporters, we respect that, and we love that you listen to the show, to call and tell me how you can support someone who deals in this kind of grotesque racism. It's foul.
Well, we have a clip from Tim Walz. It's from last week, actually, but it's pretty good. He said this on the White Dudes for Harris fundraiser Zoom call.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah, here's of course, he's the vice presidential candidate with Harris. Here he is.
How often in 100 days do you get to change the trajectory of the world? How often in 100 days do you get to do something that's going to impact generations to come? And how often in the world do you make that bastard wake up afterwards and know that a black woman kicked his ass and sent him on the road? And that's something that guy's going to have to live with for the rest of his life.
I am of the belief that that's why he was picked. I mean, how much do you think she loved that when she heard it the first time?
How much do you think it drives Trump insane that a black woman is leading him in some of the swing states? It's absolutely driving him crazy. He's got a problem with women in general.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah. I mean, one of the great photographs of his presidency when he's sitting around in one of these big meetings in wherever they have their big meetings in the White House. I don't know what room that's in. About maybe 30 people, and right across from him is Nancy Pelosi. He's sitting, Trump, and she's standing, and she's
lecturing
pointing
him. I know, I remember
his finger, her finger at him, like he's a little boy and she's the mother. And powerful women upset him, and he's facing a very powerful woman right now, and Kamala Harris.
In any case, before we go back to tomatoes, Zoe, our colleague, used to work at the Eagle Tribune before we rescued her. Yep. That's not fair, rescued. We hired her. Ran 175 articles about Willie Horton and won the Pulitzer Prize, which I did not know.
Wow.
And Dukakis ended the furlough program, according to Zoe, only after
he was in for murder, and I'm not sure it was murder and rape, but it was certainly
and he got a furlough, and
that was an
idea
things. To get lifers to get ready to get out of prison, even though they're supposedly lifers, to get these opportunities to go get out on the weekends. And he went out and he viciously raped another woman when he got out into furlough.
Okay, I'm done with that.
Okay,
Marjorie's done with
let's
that.
Get
on
back
to
tomatoes.
The tomato and you. And by the way, don't be shy. If you cannot, if Tom Brady happens to be listening, and I'm sure he does, Tom Brady, because of the inflammatory effects, is that what the problem was with the tomato?
Apparently tomatoes, like mushrooms are nightshades. Nightshade vegetables, yes, and he happens to think that, and they're also apparently high in nitrates. But he thinks that nightshades lead to inflammation, and I guess he thought that was very important for his athletic career to stay away from things that lead to inflammation. He also stays away from alcohol and caffeine, and his diet was 80-20, vegetables 80 and meats 20.
Mine is 100% inflammatory items. That's the way I've lived my life, and I'm proud of it. Andrea in the car, you're first on the Tomato Hour here on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
We can, perfectly.
All right. I'm so excited. First time, long time.
We're thrilled to have you.
I wanted to tell you the story of my great aunt. They're from the Tyrol in northern Italy. They went back to visit their relatives in the 70s and had lunch with a cousin, and the tomatoes were so good, they scraped the seeds off their plates and took them home in their purse.
Oh, my God.
So now all the cousins have rediscovered these auntie tomatoes, that's what we call them, and we all are planting them and enjoying them every summer. And we just had the first one last night. It was awesome.
By the way, that is a fabulous first call. That is a great, great story, Andrea.
So Andrea, what is your favorite thing when you eat a tomato? Do you eat it plain, or do you put it between slices of bread with maybe some mayonnaise, salt and pepper, or little olive oil?
Look at her.
What do you do, Andrea?
What do you do?
Just plain.
The first night of the big tomato that we pick, we have BLT.
Oh, that's good.
And the second night, we have a big hamburger. I'm a farm girl, so we raise our own beef. We have a big hamburger with a giant slab of tomato on it. And after that, it's bruschetta or bruschetta every night.
Oh, that's great,
Andrea, I'll be at your house by about 7. Andrea, thanks for the call. We appreciate
Listen
it.
to this. This sounds great, too. I saw this in one of these stories, an uncooked fresh sauce for pasta.
I never heard of
What
this.
you do is you put together big chunks of these gorgeous tomatoes, some slivers of garlic, lots of good olive oil, and then you just toss it all with a hot pot.
On your room temperature, whatever.
The sauce is, it's uncooked, but then you toss it all with a hot pasta.
You ever done that?
No, but even
It actually sounds great.
And I'm not much cooked that well.
Oh, really?
And you can even add some basil if you want to add some basil to it. That sounds absolutely wonderful. My favorite thing, though, is I do, of course,
white bread, mayonnaise,
That's right.
salt, and just eat it. Is that right?
That is what it is. A tomato sandwich.
You are such
it's
a
really good.
Fall River
Aiden
gal.
from Newburyport. What do you think, Aiden?
Hello, Aiden.
Hi. I did a poetry class not too long ago, and I wrote some odes about tomatoes. If you guys would like to hear one.
Oh, are you kidding me? We'd die for it. Take it away.
Thank you. So I had a garden outside a little while ago, but my landlord cut it all up, and so I used to grow tomatoes out there, and because he cut it up, I had to buy some from the store. So this poem's about that.
Okay.
It's called Cataract.
Cataract. Okay, we're ready.
While still on the vine, I plucked you for the very first time. Too soft, like there's something wrong inside. Spectre told me to give you time. 3 days go by and you're shriveled and white. Bluish gray protrudes from the side. Circles of light fur like cataract eyes. I can feel you staring, so I flop you outside. To wither, to die. Taken by the squirrel.
You know, let me tell you, Aiden, you've got a future, my friend.
That was pretty good.
That was quite
Aiden.
beautiful. Thanks for sharing that, Aiden.
Yeah.
Anytime you write a poem, give us a call. Thank you, Aiden. 877-301-8970.
I just want to say that Melissa in Situate, one of the first texters, is with me. Says, Melissa, I am currently eating an old school tomato sandwich, salt, pepper, mayonnaise, and Pepperidge Farm white bread.
Wow, that's pretty good. By the way, we're getting texts about this meme that I'm obsessed with.
Yep.
If I hold it up, can the camera get a close-up of this if you haven't seen it? Let me hold it here. It's nauseating. And again, later this week, I have an opportunity for people who think he's the right choice for president to explain why this kind of racism is good for the country. 877-301-8970 is the number. When you were a little kid, I assume you never had a real tomato, right?
Oh, they were horrible tomatoes.
Right.
Yeah,
Did you eat them anyway, or you didn't?
I don't remember, but we were eating Dinty Moore's beef stew and all these horrible things.
What was wrong with
growing up.
Dinty Moore's beef stew?
Well, I mean,
that was like my dream dinner.
Food out of a can is not really the best. Every
You
single
didn't like
sauce.
Dinty Moore's beef stew?
I did.
You open the can, you put it in a pot, you heat it up, you eat it.
Chef Raviolis, all the SpaghettiOs, all
Broadcast corned beef
those
hash, you
terrible
kidding me?
things. Listen to this. always plant tomatoes and basil next to each other. This is from Paul and Worcester. So they get used to being together. Just finished making pesto with basil from the garden. Going to put a bunch of cherry tomatoes, also from the garden, in for tomato burst.
Oh, that's
Serve
fabulous.
it over angel hair pasta with chicken and shrimp.
That is beautiful. Kevin in Marlboro, you're next on Boston Public Radio. We're talking tomatoes. Hello there. Kevin.
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, hi. I'm not from Marlboro. I'm from Auburn.
That's close enough for us, Kevin. It's all the same. Go ahead, Kevin. Sorry.
I just had my first heirloom tomato. It was a brandy wine. And I cut it open, and it was just the most incredible feast I ever had. Unbelievable.
And what took you so long in life? Whoa. What took you so long in life to have an heirloom tomato for the first time?
Well, I always did the Roma. I'm Italian, so I always did the Roma.
I like the Roma.
Tomatoes and the beefsteaks. So I figured I'd try it just for this once, and I'm never going back.
Hey, Kevin, that is great. The happiness in your voice is perfect.
By the way, I want to point out this story about the tomatoes and the mushrooms, saying Brady doesn't eat them because they're nightshades. Our staff and a bunch of texters are saying mushrooms are not actually nightshades.
So he's wrong? Tom Brady is wrong?
No, the story was wrong.
Oh.
And tomatoes, eggplants, potatoes, bell peppers, cayenne peppers, chili peppers, paprika, ground cherries, and other things. Okra.
And other things?
Are nightshades, apparently, according to this, looking it up online.
Okay, well, I'm glad you looked it up.
Okay, let's go to Michael in New Bedford. What do you think, Michael?
Hello, Michael.
Hi, good afternoon.
And to you. It's morning, but thank you anyway.
Never really, good morning, yeah, sorry. Never really a huge tomato fan until I went to Greece a few years ago and basically can't go to Greece without enjoying tomatoes.
Yeah.
So when I came back home, I planted some, and then every year they come back right out of raised beds. So pretty low maintenance.
And by the way, did you do what that woman's aunt or somebody did and bring the seeds back? Or you mean you're just growing your own tomatoes because you fell in love?
No, we just bought them from the store. No, we didn't smuggle anything back, although that's a great idea.
It is a great idea. It's probably illegal, but it's a great idea. Michael, thank you for the call. You went to Greece, Marjorie,
Yes,
as we know.
yes.
Did you eat tomatoes like Michael did?
I don't remember eating any tomatoes in Greece.
Drinking too
I just
much.
remember,
Memory is a little
being
faded.
on the island of Hydra where there are no motorized vehicles, just donkeys and walking.
You rode a donkey.
I did not. I walked.
Oh.
But if the donkeys carry people's luggage up
They
the
do?
hill from the harbor, yeah, it was unbelievable. Donkeys. I think they do have garbage trucks that come pick up the garbage, but other than that, no motorcycles, no nothing. Everybody walks. Now listen to this. Paul is one of the people that told me mushrooms aren't nightshades.
What did he
She
say?
said, she's Marjorie, mushrooms are not nightshades, but potatoes are. So Tom Brady can't eat potatoes or tomatoes. His life must suck because of that. Somehow I
didn't know
don't think
potatoes.
his
Well, I don't
does.
even know what a nightshade is, so I guess it doesn't really matter.
I don't know what they
but
are.
But potatoes are inflammatory too?
I don't know, Jim.
Does
read
anybody know?
I read the
Jamie, do you
story.
know
It was
anything
wrong.
about
I
any of
think they
this?
are.
Okay, can you look up and see if a potato is inflammatory? I don't want to give people bad advice.
The textures are all saying tomatoes and potatoes.
Well, what do they know? What are they experts on? Inflammation?
They're pretty good. They're pretty good.
Jamie's checking it out. Jamie's an expert on inflammation. Sharon in Waltham. What are we doing here? Oh, Sharon in Waltham, you're next on Boston Public Radio. We're talking tomatoes for sort of a break from all that's going on here. Hey. Wait, before you talk, who typed this note just now? Who typed this note? Potatoes have this is Nicole, anti-inflammatory properties. So these people are giving bad advice.
But white potatoes can cause inflammation.
Well, I chose to only read the first half of the note. By the way, do you eat purple tomatoes? Potatoes? I eat purple.
I eat any kind of potatoes.
Okay, fine,
I don't care. Listen to this, Julie on Cape Cod, though. She says nightshades do lead to inflammation in some people. When I gave them up in my 30s, the arthritis in her fingers that she had since she was a kid,
that's good.
in her fingers, toes, and knees disappeared. Just the dietary change.
Fabulous.
So there you go.
Sharon, I'm sorry to make you wait. Welcome to the show. Hi.
No, it's fine.
Hi.
I just wanted to tell you, I started seeing a dermatologist, and she diagnosed me with rosacea.
Oh.
And then she went on to tell me that the tomatoes would make it worse. And I said, well, we're just going to have to live with it at this time of year because the tomatoes are just too good.
Oh.
You know, in the winter when the tomatoes are that pinky, sort of yellow-orange color, not so much. But right now, I'm going to eat the tomato.
Sharon, I'm proud of you.
Red like a tomato. You know, I'm Italian. I cannot leave the tomato. I'm sorry.
Beautifully put. Sharon, thank you much for the call. We appreciate it. We got to take a break.
What's your
Marjorie.
favorite tomato iteration? How do you eat them?
I mean, I make tomato sauce that's actually quite good, if I say so myself.
Okay.
Marinara, what do you mean okay?
No, I just
And
wondered.
I like it. You know what I like it on, Marjorie, since
What?
you asked? A lox and bagel with red onion and a tomato is really about as good as it gets.
That's one of the things they have in this thing about what to do with tomatoes. Fresh bagel, cream cheese, a few slices of smoked salmon, thick slice of tomato, sprinkle with dill or fennel.
We got to do the red onion too. But short of that, it's really, those are probably my two
How about
favorite
this?
places.
A tomato, goat cheese, and chive omelet.
You know what? Also, I have to say one other thing before we take a break. I was not that much into the BLT until you bought me Bacon of the Month a few years ago. I think people who are faithful listeners to the show, Marjorie either buys me for Christmas or my birthday, Bacon of the Month, Sausage of the Month,
Salami
Hot Dog of the Month, Salami of the Month.
Yep.
And a couple of years ago, you bought me 6 months, which was rather skimpy, I should say. 6 months of Bacon of the Month. You get a pound a month.
It's very expensive, Jim.
Pound
it's the
a
best
month,
bacon.
and the best BLTs with, and I think it came in summer, so I was able to do it with a good tomato. The BLT at that time of year on good bread is as good as it gets.
I'm hungry.
I know.
Okay.
Well, we have the Newsfeed
We're taking
Cafe
a quick
right
break.
here.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, if history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes, by way of Plays in Place. The production company stages historic events where they happened. In their latest production, that's the speech abolitionist Angelina Grimke delivered at the State House. Then we head to the North End for this year's Fisherman's Feast. And finally, Marcia Lindsay, principal bartender at SRV, serves up sage advice on summer drinks. That's today on The Culture Show at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Mass General Brigham Health Plan. Innovative plans, coverage, and a broad network of doctors. Mass General Brigham Health Plan. With you every day. For more information, you can visit massgeneralbrighamhealthplan.org. And MIT Federal Credit Union, serving the diverse financial needs of their members through an array of financial services. To learn more about becoming a member, you can visit mitfcu.org. Federally insured by NCUA.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie. We're live at the library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. And lines are open at 877-301-8970. It's the Tomato Hour here on Boston Public Radio. They're really having a moment with the heat and the sun, and as Marjorie says, in Massachusetts, late July to the end of September, best in our state. So we're spending the morning talking about this this beautiful fruit, not vegetable, fruit. And by the way, for the three of you wondering whether Jared likes tomato, the answer is, what's the answer again, yes? Yes, thank you very much. Actually, it was 7 people who were interested, and they do. Jared likes the tomato. Yes, he does.
Okay, listen to this. The tomato pie I made last night, the Southern Living Heirloom tomato pie recipe. She says she cheats and bought a store-bought crust, but she says one of the best things she's ever made. And then Phil from Beacon Hill says, don't forget fried green tomatoes. My mother cooked them coated in flour with a pinch of salt, and you make sandwiches with them and top them with either mayonnaise or ketchup.
Wasn't that a movie?
It was a movie, fried green tomatoes. Yeah, it was. And somebody else wants Lily and the prosciutto lady to call in and talk about tomatoes.
Where the hell is Lily?
I don't know.
We haven't talked to her in months from
haven't
Fall
heard from
River.
her in a while.
By the way, I just have to do a shout out because it's one of my neighborhood restaurants. Aiden, our colleague, says the best lox and bagel with tomato, it disappeared, is at SNS Deli, which is right in Inman Square where I live. So
that is correct.
There you have it.
Jeffrey from Newport, thank you for calling.
Hello, Jeffrey.
Yes, hi. Long time, a few times.
Thank you.
Marjorie, I'm originally from Fall River, Mass.
There you go.
So sorry.
And I was eating when I was a baby at Magoni's in Somerset.
Whoa, my favorite restaurant.
You know, they're redoing Magoni's. They're going to have a big roof deck so we can look over the mighty Taunton River when it's done. I'm excited about it.
They're going to have actually.
I think they.
Do you know that they're going to replace the hand can openers with electric can openers when they reopen? Do you know that, Jeffrey? Only kidding.
Well, Jim, I think they had you in mind when they actually were doing that.
They may have. So, no, it's actually fabulous. I only joke. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I think they should name a cocktail after you.
Yeah.
That's right.
At Magoni's.
They absolutely should.
I don't think that's happening
in
anytime
honor of your
soon,
trashing of them over the
But why'd you call, Jeffrey? I got you off track there. Go ahead.
That's okay. I really love tomatoes, and I've been very fortunate with my grandfather to travel around Europe and different parts of the United States. And I have always collected tomato seeds, and sometimes I splice them, and I create hybrids between a brandy wine and a different type of beefsteak or whatnot. And they become the most luxurious fruit because the actual older heirloom seeds they're developed from past tomatoes that had no types of disease or issues while growing them. So it becomes meatier and less of the fluid content that holds the seeds. The seeds are a lot less in these types of tomatoes. So that's why they're prized so much. And you end up paying $5 to $10 a pound for them.
That's a beautiful story. Why do you travel? It's great. Why do you travel with your grandfather, Jeffrey?
My grandfather was an executive years ago. He's passed away for Engelhard Industries, which was one of the largest precious metals plants in the world. And my grandmother wouldn't fly with him, so he took me.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
That was
Jeffrey,
a great call,
thanks for
Jeffrey.
sharing that. We
You
appreciate
know, and
it.
the stories about the tomatoes do talk about the rituals that people go through. This guy, Kevin O'Dwyer from that Langwater farm in Northeastern, talks about how they soak the seeds in hot water to rid them of any seed-borne diseases. And then they talk about the soil, how important the nutrient-rich soils are, and the right amount of sun, and they have to have the right airflow around the tomatoes, and that field-grown tomatoes are much better than greenhouse or hydroponic tomatoes. I mean, it's a real process.
You don't grow tomatoes. Do you grow tomatoes?
No. Well, one of the textures said it's cheaper to buy them than to grow them.
But the fun is missing. It isn't about the money.
The fun is missing, yeah. But the annual tomato contest, we're going to see all these gorgeous tomatoes. If you're in town August 20th, it's going to be at the Boston Public Market. I could zip down the road after
You've
the show.
been promoting that a lot, and you have not yet committed to be there. Is that correct?
I have not yet committed to be there.
Are
We'll
you
see how
seriously?
things go.
But you are seriously.
I mean, there
thinking
could be a
about it.
potato contest someplace else that day, and I'll have to go to that
You
one.
wouldn't miss that.
Adam
By the
from
way,
Red-
the problem with the potato is whoever of our colleagues is kind enough to look into this, there are a lot of anti-inflammatory components apparently to the potato, and there are a lot of pro-inflammatory, inflammatory things. So it's a mixed bag kind of thing, Marjorie. You know?
Yes, it's a mixed bag.
When you go to the potato festival, if you can ask some of the experts there about this issue, can you report back?
I think I could be wrong. Someone will correct me. I think sweet potatoes are generally better for you than white potatoes.
I love it. You like a sweet potato?
I love any kind of potato.
I know you do.
Okay, let's wrap this up here with Adam and Randolph.
Who's
Hi,
wrapping
Adam.
it up? Go ahead. Adam.
Hey guys.
Hi.
It's Sal and Randolph. But
Alan, we're sorry.
Oh, sorry.
We are losers. Go ahead.
Oh, no worries.
It's okay.
My dad's an Italian immigrant, so I grew up every summer helping him in the garden, and the tomatoes were like the biggest deal in the garden. This time of year was the best because if the rabbits didn't get to them, you could have my favorite thing to do with tomatoes, which is a tomato salad. So you just make it the star of the show, chop up the tomatoes, put a little red onion in there, salt, pepper, and good olive oil. Make some, get some Italian bread, some nice crunchy Italian bread to eat with it. The best way to have your tomatoes at the end of the summer.
Boy, if you could have heard your own voice in that description, the star of the show, that sounds fabulous. Adam, thanks for the story. Do you notice a lot of intergenerational things in these calls?
Yeah.
Uncles, grandparents, fathers passing down seeds or lessons or something kind of thing.
Is the farm stand outside today, or was it yesterday?
I think the farm stand is here Tuesday
Yeah, I
and
think we missed
Friday.
it.
Is that right?
We missed it, so we can't go out and get any tomatoes today. We'll have to go
Well, I'm not
someplace
sure I'm
else.
right. It's on Dartmouth, but it's pretty great, yeah.
Well, I'm glad we didn't talk about depressing things. That was really fun. We are done. But
By the way, we didn't talk about depressing things, but before we leave it, do Google, if you're undecided about who you're going to vote for in November, which I don't quite understand, but if you are, Google this meme, your neighborhood under Trump and your neighborhood under Kamala, according to the Trump War Room, and then make your decision.
Okay, up next, we're going to talk to GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen. We're going to talk about the great mystery muralist Banksy, his renovation up in Gloucester at this Cape Ann Museum, and a bunch of other stuff. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News.
After recent unrest in the UK, the government has vowed to crack down on violence, but there's a problem. Many prisons like notorious Wandsworth are full and inhumane.
Rats, mice, poor showers, deaths in custody. There isn't anything good going for Wandsworth.
Dealing with prison overcrowding in Britain, next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Rockland Trust Bank, dedicated to providing advice and support to the community for over 115 years. More at rocklandtrust.com. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC. And Barrett Tree Service East. Their team of arborists and plant healthcare professionals provides sustainable management for the care of trees, plants, and lawns in the communities where they live and serve. Learn more at barretttreeeast.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We are back here on Friday. And by the way, one of our colleagues, thank you, says the farm stand on Dartmouth Street is open Tuesdays and Fridays from 11 to 6. It's pretty great, actually. There's a lot of wonderful stuff there. We're joined now by GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen, host of The Culture Show, which airs daily at 2 o'clock right after us. And by the way, not only will this segment, I mean, he's a huge attraction for us. The other attraction in this segment, Marjorie is going to give a short tutorial on Gilgamesh in this segment. She said as soon as she figures out what Gilgamesh is, she's going to share that with us. So I, for one, am looking forward to it. Jared, nice to see you.
Yeah.
Better you than me, Marjorie.
Well, I was hoping that you can straighten me out in Gilgamesh. There's something to do, I don't know if it's got something to do with the Bible or something to do with some ancient tale, but in any case, before we get to Gilgamesh.
We have about 4 minutes to get up to speed on it, Marjorie.
Okay. Tell us about Banksy's latest work. And you know, Jim was saying before, does everybody know who he is? I don't know if everybody knows who he is.
I don't think anybody knows who he is.
So he's got a very sort of secretive tale about him. So tell us before we get to London.
Before we get to London, so yeah, he has been working since the 1990s. He started as a muralist, a secret muralist. Nobody, well, we can qualify this maybe. Most people don't know his identity.
Do you know his identity?
I don't know his identity, but I know his first name, I think, which is Robbie.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he slipped that out in an interview. He
it was a
corrected
BBC interview.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. So he has been making these murals in the dark of night since the 1990s. He started in Bristol, England, then moved to London, and now he really makes murals all around the world. He was in Ukraine not too long ago, leaving a mural there. So people just wake up to find these murals on all manner of things, on buildings, on, as we just saw recently, satellite dishes everywhere. And so he has grown up huge and blown up huge in the art world. So now his work goes for high auction prices. People try to steal his work if it's done in a public space so that they can own it, turn it around, maybe sell it. I don't know. I don't know how that's possible since they wouldn't necessarily own it. Remember, there was an auction a few years ago where there was an auction for one of his pieces.
Oh, the balloon thing.
And then it
destroyed itself.
It went halfway through the shredder. And so then it made even more money when it sold later on.
You know, first of all, I wasn't aware of this, I'm sure you are. Some people think it's a collaborative of people, too. It may not just be one person. Putting that aside, do you remember, Marjorie, Charlie Sennett, and in the early days of the war in Ukraine, we were talking to him. One of the most dramatic pieces of art I've ever seen in my life, there's a building in the background which is totally destroyed. I mean, totally destroyed. And at the base of the building is a silhouette of a young girl doing a handstand. One of the most powerful things I've ever seen. And I assume someone had done it in the style of Banksy. Banksy did this thing, and talk about survival and fight against this horror from Putin. It was just really incredibly powerful.
And a lot of his work lately has been very political. One of the most recent pieces was a blow-up boat filled with dummies and life jackets. This was commenting on how the world is dealing with migrants. People thought it was really vile. He responded. He does a lot of his exchanges now on Instagram. That's how he communicates out what he's talking about with his work when he does talk about his work, which isn't often in terms of offering insight. He's often looked at the environment. He's done pieces for Greenpeace, and and he also did Dismal Land a few years ago, this whole theme park that was, if you were to shake out the darkest parts of what Disney World might be, it was horrible and wretched. So it's been his commentary, but I think with this latest work, he's taken a cue out of what you just both did and starting off the show talking about tomatoes and something positive. For the last more than a week now, he has been, again, under the cover of darkness, going around London and leaving these murals, and they're really, really delightful. People were very perplexed because they're all animals. It's a rhinoceros mounting a car. It's a pelican over fish and chip shops with one of the pelicans trying to take one of the fish from the sign. It's a cat stretching. The latest was a gorilla letting out animals from the zoo painted on the gate that comes down in front of the zoo. And really,
how does no one ever... I don't understand this. He does this under the cover of darkness.
So he shows up at midnight and works until 5 in the morning.
So how does someone not spot him and take a photograph? I don't get this.
I think he can do it really quickly. I think that there are surveillance cameras, and in fact,
right, in London, there's so many.
So many. And then one of the locations, the person who lived nearby thought that he might be able to capture it on the camera, but he's expert at doing this, and it may not just be him. Right. It could be this collective, and so unless people are staking it out, they're not going to find him.
Well, when he goes and does it in London with all the cameras, you should point out, does he try to disguise himself? If anybody does, I mean, somebody must have got a picture. And
there aren't that many images. You just always see a clouded figure in a sweatshirt, and so you can't find the identity. Even the people. So one of the pieces was a wolf that was painted on a satellite dish. That was one of the spate of 9 that he recently did, and people stole it because they want a Banksy. And 2 of the people, you can see this video, weren't smart enough to put masks over their faces.
Marjorie was too shy to ask this question. She asked me if I would ask it on her behalf, so I will. Has he ever done a silhouette of Gilgamesh? To your knowledge, has he ever?
Okay. Well, okay.
We didn't even get an answer yet. No certainty. Okay.
Okay. Why don't we just get to this Gilgamesh thing? Okay. It's an ancient epic work, and AI got involved. And as best I can figure out, this is the epic tale of this demigod and the king of Uruk and his wild man sidekick, Enkidu.
Sure. I'm here to talk about the AI part. Yeah, basically, this is all the story of facing death. Gilgamesh goes on a quest to find this ancestor who's kind of Noah-esque, as in Noah and the Ark, who has learned the secret to immortality. It's not an easy quest. There are lots of battles and murders and killing along the way. So this is a very, very ancient tale. The reason we're talking about it is because of artificial intelligence. We've talked a lot about the bad parts of AI, but this is one of the good parts. We're seeing more and more where software has been created that can decode tablets that are now scattered all across the world. So you have these cuneiform tablets. There are about 500,000 of them in collections, museums, everywhere. And so AI can scan through all of these collections and start to piece them together. So it's helped us understand more of what this tale is.
What's cuneiform?
They're the stone tablets,
and
the writing that's on the tablets. And a lot of what's out there actually has nothing to do with Gilgamesh or these grand tales. A lot of it's just bills of sale, private letters, school book exercises. But then we find literature and philosophy and poetry. Gilgamesh was all about kind of this philosophy about immortality.
By the way, Zoe, our coworker, this is actually rather impressive. I played Gilgamesh in my 3rd grade production, The Epic of Gilgamesh.
There you
Not
go.
to brag. So that's actually fairly impressive.
I just keep thinking of Gargamel from this.
By the way, she doesn't know who Gilgamesh is either, I should say. I checked it out.
So can I also say, this is the 3rd time this year that we're seeing something major like this. There was an incident.
AI thing, you mean?
In AI, they began decoding these oracle bones with ancient Chinese characters so they can start to piece them together. And what's really exciting, back in February, there was a $700,000 prize granted to 3 students who developed software to look at these ancient scrolls that were thought to be unreadable because they fell victim to the Vesuvius explosion. They weren't from Pompeii, they were another town. They were owned by Julius Caesar's father-in-law. And this AI has begun to decode those as well. So we're going to be able to explore thousands of years of civilization through AI.
Well, that's pretty neat.
It is.
I mean, they were saying one of these things had something to do with the book of Genesis, which is pretty damn old, too.
Yeah, it's very old.
Yeah.
We're really
It's
casting a lot of light on
so,
the content
well,
of this work,
I mean,
I
but
should
the
say.
but it's
What
really,
is the point?
I'm not going to go out and read the epic tale of Gilgamesh, whatever his name is, despite Zoe's
Why don't you talk
star
to Zoe?
performance.
She played Gilgamesh.
But I would be interested in AI being able to put all these pieces of these puzzles together, because there are a lot of ancient scrolls and things that we only have parts of, and it'd be pretty neat.
Oh my God.
Well, also, there are these...
What are you laughing at?
Yeah, what's going on?
I mean, really. Go ahead. You're really excited about them putting together ancient... I mean, how excited are you about that?
Yeah. Would you not like to know what Julius Caesar's father-in-law was doing back in the day?
I'd like to know who Julius Caesar's father-in-law was. That's what I would like to know before I worry about... No, it's very exciting. And we're all excited.
Yeah, but his name was Herman.
Herman Caesar.
Oh, boy. So I often find myself saying, what is happening here?
Exactly. Jared's reputation goes right in the toilet every time he's with us, and then he tries to rehabilitate
well, let's
it
move on from
2 to
Gilgamesh,
3
then.
every day.
Let's move on.
We're going to get back to Herman a little bit later in the segment, too, so don't go away.
So tell us what's going on.
Caesar. Jamie is having a fit over there.
Yeah, well, he knows quality radio when he hears it. Let's leave it.
Lots of people have never been to the Cape Ann Museum up there in Gloucester. They should go because it is gorgeous. They have unbelievably beautiful seascapes, ocean stuff.
They just had the big hopper thing, right?
They had the big hopper thing. And haven't they had Winslow Homer up there? They still do have Winslow Homer's paintings up there. So it's a really cool place. What's going on up there?
So next year will mark the 150th anniversary of the Cape Ann Museum, which was founded as a collection of maritime memorabilia and paintings and became the Historical Society, and then evolved into the Cape Ann Museum. And they have a relatively new director in Oliver Barker, and he has worked with their team to, I think, make them have a much larger profile, national, even international, by having a major Winslow Homer show, by having that major hopper show, which brought in about 40,000 more visitors last summer than they would ordinarily experience. So that has given them momentum now to raise about $18 million to completely revamp the downtown museum. So they have 2 campuses, one in an old sea captain's house from 1804. So you can imagine what old homes in New England are like. We've all been in them. And so they want to start moving staircases and just making it more museum passage friendly. So they'll have interactive displays, they'll have new gallery space, they can continue to do big shows like Hopper. In fact, they will be in a couple of years doing a big show looking at how people like Mark Rothko came to Cape Ann and painted. This is going to be a collaboration.
Because of the light.
Because of the light, artists have, for centuries, have always come to the coast, to either Provincetown, the coast of Maine, or Gloucester was a huge place for so many artists to come and paint the light, the seascape, just go away for the summer. This wasn't, drive up for a couple of hours one day and paint. This was come and spend the entire summer and really move yourself forward as an artist. So that'll be a collaboration with the Phillips Museum, but this is a major effort. So while they're doing that, they'll shift everything down to their campus green, which is, if you're driving into Gloucester, it's one of the first things you see as soon as you cross over the bridge. I think Lobster Land is right there as you cross over. So they'll have exhibitions there for the next year and a half. Everything will be free while this is all underway, and then they do their big reopening. So we'll see this major revamp of one of our treasured museums.
What's Lobster Land?
It's a restaurant.
It is really
Have you
a
never
restaurant?
been to Lobster
I've
Land?
never even heard of it,
It's
actually.
Lobster Land, not Lobster Land.
Lobster Land. My apologies.
You know what's the coolest thing when you drive into Gloucester on the right-hand side? You see that little house right in the middle of that inlet. This little tiny house just sitting there by itself. Yeah. And somebody lives in there, and that would be a good story, actually, if I was still a newspaper.
You know who lived there years ago? You do. We talked about this. Gilgamesh lived there in the... By the way, speaking of Gilgamesh, about which I knew nothing, the amazing thing that we don't know, I'm sorry, I'm just looking this up, is that, I know you said this part, the semi-mythic king of Uruk, if that's how you say it, best known as the hero of the tale epic of Gilgamesh, which is how he played him.
Yep.
The great Babylonian poem that predates, this is the interesting part, which is why I'm sort of surprised we don't know anything, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey by 1,500 years, and therefore stands as the oldest piece of epic world literature, which makes your AI thing even more important.
That's right.
Why is that not more prominent in our... You were like, weren't you an American civics major or some
well, Gilgamesh
crap?
was not in the United States, Jim.
Well, either, I don't think, as far as I know, I don't believe Homer was in the United States either. Is that correct?
Winslow Homer?
No, Homer, as in the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Okay, Winslow Homer was definitely here. But, the Iliad and the Odyssey is going to be undercovered more by AI as well.
Okay, fine.
We're going to learn more, and this all tells us about our future too. As we understand more about how the past happened, and we can take lessons, and we understand how they thought about the world and philosophies. Jim is not believing anything.
No, actually,
you're not buying into any of it.
I am so AI skeptic that I have a hard time, even though I intellectually know that you're totally right about this advance. I'm so nervous about its other potential evil that I have a hard time digesting the positive.
Well, I always have to put a little asterisk with these conversations because I feel exactly the same way. However, I'm resigned to the fact that this is here to stay. So we have to embrace what's good, and we have to keep challenging what is bad, aka all the stealing artists' copyrights and work and using them for its own.
Putting writers out of business, putting technicians out of business, whatever.
Okay.
We're talking to Jared Bowen.
Tell us about suffrage in black and white.
What?
I think this is Light Under the Dome.
Oh, Light Under the Dome.
This is going very smoothly, this segment. Have you noticed?
Sorry.
It's like clockwork.
I haven't had my tomatoes yet today.
Okay.
Go ahead.
This is the State House play.
So Suffrage in Black and White, I forgot. That's the overarching name for this series of 3 plays that are coming over the next few years. The first is underway right now. So this is actually very exciting, and it's a very good play. It's called A Light Under the Dome, and it takes us back to 1838 when Angelina Grimke, who was an abolitionist in the South, was exiled from the South for her views on slavery and trying to end slavery, went on the speaking tour. Her sister was really the one who did most of the speaking. At one point, her sister became ill. She had to step in for her sister, and she became the first woman to speak to a state legislature in the United States. That happened at the State House.
It's a great story.
So A Light Under the Dome recounts that story of Angelina Grimke speaking to thousands of people here in Massachusetts in, again, 1838. This is many decades before we will see an end to slavery in this country. And she's doing this at a time when she is a woman, and she's the other characters in the play are women who are part of the Boston Women's Anti-Slavery Society. So to be a woman speaking out against slavery in a place where there are still a lot of proponents of slavery in Boston at that time. In fact, there were major rallies. This is talked about as well. There was just epic bravery that happened. So you, as the audience member, as I did the other night, go into the State House, you go into the Senate chamber, you sit in one of the
Because they're on their 5-month vacation.
Well, this is one
they
good
don't
reason
need,
they're
They
on
don't need the
vacation.
space.
You sit in, they have seats in the well. I chose to sit in one of the senators' seats, whoever sits at desk number 12, and you watch this unfold. It's, again, one of these exciting moments. Plays and Place is doing this in addition to the National Parks of Boston, where you get to see history unfold again
Where
as
it
a drama
happened.
in the room where it happened.
That's really, actually, that really is exciting.
Well, that's just like they were doing the plays. Was it King's Chapel that they were doing the plays before?
Yes, with the
real reenactments of the person that was the 3 people that were the night before they thought the revolution was going to begin. And
that was the Old North Church.
Old North Church. I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought that was a brilliant idea too. They had it from one of the person that was pro-revolution, anti-revolution, and a black slave. That was a brilliant
And we've seen at the old State House a whole debate about independence on the eve of the Boston Massacre, so you could literally look out the window and see everything they're talking about. So yeah, and because of how austere the Senate chamber is, I was trying to remember, I was an intern at the State House years ago. When I was in college.
Not.
I worked in the governor's press office.
You did?
For Governor Cellucci. Yeah.
You did?
Yep.
Really?
And I don't think I had ever gone into the Senate chamber in all that time.
What'd you do? Exactly. That's what I figured.
I know.
No, really,
But,
what did you
I
do?
think I did a lot of having to literally clip out the newspaper.
Yeah,
Wow.
those were the days.
And report back what all the press, what
You
Marjorie Egan was saying in her column.
That's right. That's right. We had a great story when one of our reporters, Maggie Melville, went up to his house and interrupted him when he was cooking his pasta
remember
dinner
this story.
to ask him about some scandal that was going on at the Department of Social Services. He was right in the middle of cooking the pasta. He said, I don't think he was very happy about it. He was a nice guy, though, Paul Cellucci.
He was.
Hey, I want to have a question for you, though. We've talked to you about Queen of Versailles. You saw we had F. Murray Abraham and Greg Hildreth,
He's great.
local actor in here yesterday. You talked to Kristen Chenoweth on your show, The Culture Show. I wondered how, they're saying this is the pre-Broadway, right? And then we also hear about the ART in Cambridge where they'll have some big hit, and then that's going to go to Broadway. Who decides? Is it the Broadway theaters, or, I mean, it seems like the ART, things are a big hit, and then they say we're going to Broadway. This is here, kind of almost trying out before it goes to Broadway. So how does that work, this going to Broadway thing?
It's a couple different things. So you always have producers involved who have an intention. So for Queen of Versailles, you have producers who they know. They're pulling Kristen Chenoweth.
It's the money people we're talking about.
Yes, exactly. They're teaming her with, or they came together organically, but Stephen Schwartz reteaming from Wicked. So they know this is tailor-made for Broadway. They know they want to get it right before it opens on Broadway. This is your out-of-town tryout. This is your chance to put it before an audience and see what the audience thinks and then take it to Broadway. So in this case, they knew it was predetermined because the producers wanted it. So
okay.
In the case of somebody like the ART or the Huntington Theater, which has also sent shows to Broadway, and for a nonprofit, I think there may be the aim, there may be the hope. They might cast it that way because they have a sense that this will work, and then they invite producers in. There might be producers attached at the beginning, but then they invite people in from New York to see whether they think it's going to be viable. So it happens both ways. And sometimes they say, yes, this is magic, you've got the whole mixture together, and sometimes they look at it and say, no, we just don't think this is going to play in New York.
Okay, and so sometimes they will tinker with it. They might
always tinker.
They
That's
do.
why you do this.
Make it shorter, make it longer, remove
Yep.
certain songs, remove certain players, maybe even.
Yeah, we've talked about this at Elliot Norton, the great Boston theater critic. I know you.
Yes.
I think you ended up with his typewriter.
At the
I
Herald.
did.
Yes, I did.
But they would rely on people like Elliot Norton, who were these really prominent theater critics in major cities, because of course Hartford was a tryout town, Philadelphia was a big tryout town. So they would really want to know what Elliot Norton thought. And in his case, he could direct the direction of a show by making comments in his review. There was the Neil Simon comedy, The Odd Couple, and one whole character
I love
was
that.
given a whole built-up role because Elliot Norton wrote in his
That's
review.
a great story.
Why didn't we see more of her? She was so
That's great.
entertaining. Neil Simon went back and wrote more of her.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So how do they decide now that there's no more Elliot Norton? I mean, we do have critics in Boston, but not with that kind of power.
Well, they'll listen to the critics, but they also listen to the audiences every single night. For the entire time the Queen of Versailles is here in Boston, there are people that are in the audience, in the back of house, listening and watching how audiences respond, see what lands, what doesn't land, what gets big laughs, what songs don't seem to settle right. It's a really big, I don't know if you talked to F. Murray Abraham about this and Greg Hildreth, but it's a really big challenge for them too, because often they're being, this is also the excitement of the theater, but they're being thrown new scripts and new lines and new songs because they're working to get new material in to see what's going to work.
So these are people in the back of the audience posing as just regular theater goers.
Well, they're not posing. They're just, I mean, it's...
Like air marshals kind of thing.
Theater air marshals.
They work for the damn production and they're
No, I
checking
just
out
wondered
the reaction.
if you might be sitting next to one. I mean, but you
could be.
You could be.
Have you
Okay.
ever figured out that you're sitting next to an air marshal?
I have,
Jim
actually.
was arrested.
I have.
You
Yes.
were not arrested.
And I have, no, well, I was threatened
He was
with
arrested.
arrest. Let's not do this again.
Hey.
I was threatened with arrest. And by
I
the way,
I know most
totally-
of the stories. I don't know this one.
This
Yeah,
is
it was
when
a little
the little
boy.
boys in
A
front of me.
little boy.
I'm come back from
Jim had
London.
a fisticuffs
and
with a
I didn't get
six-year-old.
fisticuffs. No, I did not get it. His seat was all the way back. I couldn't fit. So when he went to the bathroom, I pressed the button on his seat and went all the
Yeah.
way forward. His father started screaming at me. I started screaming at the kid. And they said if I don't shut up, they're going to have the air marshals take me off the plane.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, we only have a minute. There's no time. Is Clark Museum thing going to be available
Yeah, we can
next
talk
week?
about it next week.
Next week, okay.
Yep.
You have
All
anything
right.
else? By the way, do you know, I've known
the
you
show.
for what?
What's on the
Oh,
show?
his show, right.
What's on the
your
show?
show?
We're talking about meatballs and cocktails and a light under the dome. We'll have some of the creative team there. By the way, that is free. There are only a couple of performances left
great.
through this week, but it's free to go into the State House and sit at one of the state senators'
Meatballs
seats.
and cocktails?
Yeah, we'll talk about the Fisherman's Feast at the North End.
Someone just typed here, he says, the plot twist, the kid was the air marshal.
Okay.
That's a true story, sadly, by
It
the
is.
way.
It
and I was not
one of
I
your
was not
finest
the anti-hero
hours.
here. I was.
I think you generally don't pick on a 6-year-old, Jim. That would
Should
be
a
mine.
6-year-old who's 3 feet 8 inches tall recline his seat 100% when
Yeah.
I'm sitting behind him and I'm 6'5"?
I think perhaps the parent is the person you might interact with.
And then you ate all his tea and
That
biscuits.
kid, by the way, is in jail now. I want you to know.
Okay.
That was the beginning
All right.
of a real downward slide for the young lad.
We've been speaking with Jared Bowen, Executive Arts Center and host of the Culture Show here at GBH, which you can hear every day right after 2 o'clock. And on Fridays, they broadcast right.
Well, GBH has it all in one place. Whatever your drama destination, start streaming anytime at gbh.org/passport.
I'm Deputy Investigative Editor Jennifer McKim, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR, what matters to you.
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. We're talking with Boston educator and author Nima Avashia, who grew up in the same Appalachia as J.D. Vance, but has a totally different perspective on its politics and the region. Then it's Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Young talking about restaurant goers feeling the squeeze in their wallets, not their waists.
I'm Marjorie Egan. We'll talk with folks from farm and wilderness summer camps in Vermont about what we gain when we ditch our screens for out. Then we end with you. Is it more to admit you love your dog more than your spouse? Maybe even your kids? All that ahead. Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Nora Rahm. The FBI is investigating efforts to hack into both the Republican and Democratic presidential campaigns. Several news organizations say they received documents apparently obtained from the Trump campaign. The Harris campaign says it's been told it was a target as well. NPR's Shannon Bond has more.
It says the FBI notified it back in July that it had been targeted by a foreign actor, but that the campaign is not aware of any breaches. So you might wonder, sort of, where does this leave us? And I think what we do know is it appears Iran is indeed targeting presidential campaigns. It's done that in past election cycles, so not so surprising to see them do it again. What we don't know is, first of all, whether any of this year has succeeded. And specifically, we don't know whether these leaked Trump campaign documents are tied to Iran.
NPR's Shannon Bond. Hamas says it won't participate in ceasefire talks that are set to take place tomorrow in either Qatar or Egypt. President Biden has called on all parties to restart negotiations after the killing of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. It's presumed to have been carried out by Israel. NPR's Hadil El-Shalchi reports.
A senior Hamas spokesman said today that the group wants Israel to commit to a ceasefire proposal discussed last month, and that was based on President Biden's vision. Sohail El-Hindi told NPR that if Israel commits, Hamas would be prepared to start discussing how to implement the deal. He said Hamas will not be part of a new round of talks tomorrow. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has blamed Hamas for obstructing negotiations. The New York Times reported Tuesday that documents show that Netanyahu has been inflexible in recent talks, adding new conditions to his demands. Netanyahu has denied the report. Hadil Al-Shalchi, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
Thailand's constitutional court today removed the prime minister from office, saying Srettha Thavisin had grossly breached ethical standards. The parliament must now name a new prime minister. The latest data on consumer prices in the U.S. show inflation in the economy in July rose at its smallest annual pace in more than 3 years. NPR's Scott Horsley reports.
Consumer prices in July were up 2.9% from a year ago. That's the smallest annual increase since March of 2021. Prices rose 0.2% between June and July. Rising housing costs accounted for most of that monthly increase. Grocery prices rose just 0.1% during the month, while energy prices were flat. Airfares and used car prices were down. Stripping out volatile food and energy prices, so-called core inflation was 3.2% in July, slightly lower than the month before. Slowing inflation could clear the way for the Federal Reserve to start cutting interest rates when policymakers meet next month. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
At last check on Wall Street, the Dow is up 237 points. This is NPR News in Washington.
Good afternoon from the GBH newsroom in Boston. I'm Craig Lamolt. Kamala Harris's running mate, Tim Walz, is headed to Massachusetts for a fundraiser this evening. More from GBH's Adam Riley.
Walz's visit to Boston is part of a 3-day swing that'll take him to 5 states, starting in California and ending in New York. Massachusetts is considered a lock for Harris and Walz this fall, but the state is a hotbed for deep-pocketed Democratic donors, and tickets for the reception reportedly start at $25,000 a head. Polling shows Walz has become more popular since he was selected as Kamala Harris's running mate, in contrast to J.D. Vance, whose popularity has dipped since he became Donald Trump's pick for vice president. Adam Riley, GBH News 89.7.
Meanwhile, local Democratic lawmakers are coming to Harris's defense as she faces criticism from Republicans for an alleged lack of attention to the press. Since President Biden stepped aside last month, Vice Presidential candidate J.D. Vance and others say Harris has yet to field questions from reporters or sit for an interview. Democratic whip and Massachusetts Congresswoman Catherine Clark says that criticism was an attempt to create a false controversy.
She is, of course, taking questions from the press and will continue to do so. So I understand that J.D. Vance has had a rough go here and is flailing to try and make an issue that sticks.
Clark says she's unsure if Harris will sit for an interview ahead of next week's Democratic National Convention and the next debate, but she says Harris will continue to answer questions from the press at those events. Sunny today, a high in the mid-80s, a chance of showers tonight, and tomorrow temps in the 80s and a chance of showers in the afternoon.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One, offering their premium travel card, Venture X. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. Details at CapitalOne.com. And listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, hour number 2. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back here again on Friday. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Margie. Nima Avashia's Indian-American family is part of an extremely narrow minority in West Virginia, a place where she describes as having demographics that put you in two camps, one of two camps, white or not white. Yet she describes feeling more hillbilly than Hindu, and has been vocal since J.D. Vance's ascension of the Republican presidential ticket. He does not represent the Appalachia that she knows. Nima is the author of Another Appalachia, Growing Up Queer and Indian in a Mountain Place, also been a Boston Public Schools educator for a couple of decades. Nima, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for coming. So tell us, before we get into J.D. Vance and his book, tell us about your experience growing up there.
Sure. So my family immigrated to West Virginia from India via New York in the early 70s. My dad went to work in the chemical industry in West Virginia, which is one thing that a lot of people don't know, which is that West Virginia and Eastern Tennessee and Kentucky were actually home to a significant portion of the petrochemical industry in this country for a very long time. And I grew up in a community where there were very few people of color. And certainly there were challenges with that. There were people who didn't really understand our family or our community, who struggled with racism at times. But overwhelmingly, my experience was one of care and love. I've lived outside of Appalachia for 20 years now, but I will always say that people in Appalachia know how to love like nobody else in this country does. The kind of care that folks extend, the way in which they're willing to put their needs away in order to meet someone else's needs is incredibly powerful.
And how did J.D. Vance, in your estimation, by the way, I should say, well, Marjorie has read Hillbilly Elegy and talks about it a lot here since Vance's ascension. I have not. How did he get it wrong, in your estimation?
So I think it's important to say, like, Vance is entitled to write a memoir, but a memoir is a story of your life. Mm-hmm. And even the subtitle to his memoir, I think, gives away that that's not all he's doing, because his book is called Hillbilly Elegy, a memoir of a family and a culture in crisis. And that's where I take a little bit of umbrage, maybe a lot of umbrage, because this notion of Appalachia as having a monoculture, where everyone is the same way, is already a problem. There have been black folks in Appalachia for the past 3 centuries. There have been indigenous people in Appalachia for millennia. There have been immigrants to Appalachia from all over the world for a very long time. West Virginia is home to the largest per capita trans population in the country.
Why is that? Don't gloss over. Why is that, do you think?
Why there are so many trans youth?
Yeah.
I think rural spaces lend themselves to queerness in a lot of ways. I think that there are not as tight of boundaries around like ways that things should and shouldn't be in some ways. You know, one of the overlapping spaces between queer culture and Appalachian culture is this idea of chosen family. You don't have these same rules around blood family because the people around you become your family. A lot of the time out of need in both of those communities, no one was coming to save them, and so they built the communities for themselves that could do that for one another. And so I think there is just sort of this way in which queerness exists in a larger degree. But the point of all that is just to say, to paint a place as one thing is false, right? It's fine for Vance to talk about his family, to talk about his experience, when he starts to say things like, the people of Jackson County are lazy and blame the government for their problems. The young men of Middleton, Ohio don't want to work. That's where I have a problem. Because I think that rendering of place and people has actually caused a lot of people outside of Appalachia to sort of absolve themselves of responsibility.
Yeah.
Well, if this group of people is just lazy and they don't want to work and they, they just blame the government.
I know you're not a mind reader. Does he choose to ignore the reality you describe, or does he just not know it?
It's hard. I mean, I'm not his mind reader, but
that.
It's hard. Like even when I read the sections about his grandmother, yes, his grandmother, he paints her as this like gun-toting granny, but she also extended tons of care to him. And I feel like his orientation is such a deficit orientation, even around white working class people. He doesn't extend any grace towards them. He sees it as like, I pulled myself up, like you all are a failure if you can't. This culture is a failed culture. It is a morally bankrupt culture. It is, it's interesting, it's a culture of poverty narrative just being applied to poor white people instead of poor black people, which is what was happening in the 70s, right? That to me, I think in some ways does feel like a choice. When I read that book, I was pretty clear that it was one of those books that's sort of a memoir, but is actually a political announcement. Even at the time when he wrote it, that was clear. So I think there is a policy narrative underneath the personal narrative and the culture narrative. And the policy narrative is like, we don't need to do anything for these people.
We're talking to Nima Avashia. Her book is Another Appalachia, Growing Up Queer and Indian in a Mountain Place.
I think it's his whole political framework is warped by his very screwed up childhood, because it seemed to me when you do read the book, a lot of people expect it to be sort of an indictment of the lack of help from the government, the lack of good jobs, the lack of good wages, the lack of good education, et cetera, et cetera. J.D. Vance was clearly furious at his mother. I get why. She had, 5 husbands, 19 boyfriends, and threatened to kill him, and it was horrible. So it seems to me he's taking from the supposed immorality of his mother to a writ large kind of thing. That's what so I think a lot of people were surprised. I was when I read that. But as you point out, it's similar to, I think, what people have said about poverty in the black community in the 70s and now, or what people have said about white poverty in other parts of the country. So it's as you say, if you blame the people, then you don't have to do anything about it.
That's right. And that's the goal, right?
Yeah.
Because when you look at his policy positions, they do zero for the people of Appalachia. They do nothing for Appalachian people in any way, shape, or form. So it's very hard to watch him stand up there and say, I won't forget where I came from, when he's lining his very wealthy pockets, as we saw in the news yesterday about his investment holdings, with money from Big Pharma, which is single-handedly responsible for the destruction of so many families and communities in Appalachia, where they have poured pills on pills on pills into tiny towns with one pharmacy. His sort of rhetoric and his actions don't match. And so when he's being held up, the New York Times for so long called him a son of Appalachia. They only recently had a memo go out to people from the Style Desk saying, don't use that phrase anymore because it's actually not right? But from 2016 to now, he's held this mantle on every major news organization in this country, CNN, NPR, New York Times, they all held him up as representing something that he doesn't actually represent.
You mentioned the opioid thing. Elizabeth Warren may have been the first person to talk to us about, 81 million doses of an opioid going to this one tiny county.
Kermit, West Virginia.
Is that where it is? Yeah. Kermit, West Virginia. And obviously, as you say, in West Virginia. It's another thing you read about too, is another thing that the Vance Trump-Vance twosome don't give a damn about. In fact, a denial about climate change, which is a huge issue in that part of our country, is it not?
Absolutely right. Yeah, I have. I'm really honored to be very close to lots of folks in Eastern Kentucky. In Eastern Kentucky, 2 years ago, last week, suffered catastrophic flooding. People in Eastern Kentucky, there are still people living in their cars. There are still people who are unhoused, who have not recovered from that flooding. That flooding is at the really unholy marriage of climate change and extractive industries, which have also terribly exacerbated flooding in that region through strip mining, which makes flooding so much worse. And Vance is from Breathitt County, which is one of the counties, Vance's family is from Breathitt County, which is one of the counties that is hardest hit, and there's no acknowledgement that climate change plays a role in what's happening there.
You know, Nima, when I was anticipating you coming, I thought about something I'm embarrassed to admit I haven't thought about before. When you're describing Vance as either intentionally or otherwise misportraying what the world is like and what lives are like and how people treat each other in that part of the country, I think I have to plead guilty to buying into the same stereotypes, and I haven't even read the book. And I was trying to think, maybe to take blame off myself for lack of enough curiosity. I think my analysis, was twofold, and tell me if I'm missing something big. One, because they're overwhelmingly red states in that part of the country. We don't have candidates going there, so we don't have in presidential elections and others. So we don't have people like John King from CNN who goes down there and talks to real voters, Republicans, Democrats, and others, and get to see what life is like. And the second thing, which I think you mentioned one of our colleagues when you were talking, is the talking heads who we spend a lot of time in our lives hopefully learning from or at least listening to are coastal for the most part, some Midwestern, but I was trying to think of somebody who, for example, other than, and he's from Louisiana, other than James Carville, I don't know, obviously the huge player for the Clintons, for Bill Clinton years ago, that part of the punditry, a word I hate, almost totally excludes people from that part of the world. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I also think it's why I feel like the response to the Waltz nomination was so fascinating to me, because all the pundits the day after the Waltz nomination were like, this was a terrible idea. It's not going to get her any electoral vote. Like, why would she have done it? And all the people I know from rural places were thrilled that for the first time they were seeing someone in that position who represented them. Tim Waltz had 24 people in his graduating high school class. He comes from a town of 3,000, right? He gets small. He's from small. J.D. Vance is from Middletown, Ohio, no matter what he wants to tell you. He's born and raised there, and Middletown, Ohio is a suburb of Cincinnati. It's got 51,000 people who live there, right? So any claim he's making, it's like my daughter, was in the back there, but maybe was making noise. I want her to feel connected to Appalachia. If she ever thinks that she's going to stand up and represent Appalachia, we're going to need to have a talk, because she's born here. She can have commitments and relationships. Even for me, I'm very mindful of the fact I've been away. So before I get up here and do this, I always talk to people at home to make sure that I'm in the right place to do this.
Can we stand there for a second? So you're a Bostonian, you're in the city where that neighborly thing isn't happening. Yeah. So what does that do for someone who grew up with it and obviously it was a huge part of your life as you described, and then it doesn't exist anymore? What's that like?
Yeah, I don't call myself a Bostonian.
Okay, but you live here now.
I do live here, but I live here and it's really hard for me. The closest I feel like I got to West Virginia neighborliness was during COVID in the city. That was the first time I feel like people in my neighborhood looked at each other and talked to each other and connected and helped each other. Or snowstorms, that's the other time.
Snowstorms
you get a big blizzard and the neighborliness comes out and people dig out your car, right?
Yeah.
Because I think those are the moments when your need is visible. Right? I think we live in a place where it's very hard for people to be vulnerable and to say when they need things. We live in a city. You shouldn't need anything. All the resources are here. You should be able to just figure it out for yourself.
Well, it's not just that. It's also isolation in many. We talk about bowling alone, Bob Putnam's book, a lot of time, because people are literally bowling alone.
That's right.
And my guess is they're not bowling alone in the part of the world where you grew up.
No, you can't bowl alone. Well, there's no bowling alley, really. So, what do you do?
Had there been one, yes.
My partner's from Brooklyn. Whenever we go home, she's like, what do people do here? And I'm like, you go sit on someone's porch, and you talk, and that's connection is community. That's what you're doing. That is not here. I wish it was.
We're talking to Nima Avashnia. Got it right.
Yep.
Nima Avashnia, about her experience growing up in Appalachia. Tell us. You mentioned that you were a little upset that the infrastructure needs weren't being paid attention to when people are trying to scapegoat, trans kids, foster kids, or something like that. What is the politics? What was the politics like in your hometown? What were the efforts to try to do the kind of things like better streets, or maybe better schools, or better library, whatever? What was that like?
Well, so I lived in an unincorporated place, so we didn't have a lot of infrastructure. I always say that on my street, my dad was a doctor, and on my street, people would call my dad before they called the ambulance because my dad was going to get there faster, right? So And people didn't talk politics. Like, it was actually culturally not a thing that people did. It's still, even in this moment, not the same as it is here. Here, you can't go 2 steps without seeing a lawn sign. My neighbors didn't do that, right? There was a way in which I think in the time when I grew up, which is the 80s and 90s, people felt like you could vote how you voted and it didn't necessarily have to shape your relationships quite to the extent that I think is very different now, because what we're voting on now is whether people think that like my queer family has a right to exist. Right. So I think that has changed, and I think that it's made it so the need to talk politics is more because we're talking about people's survival. But it wasn't like that. And I do think the one thing that was very, very formative for me was unions. So unions were such a strong part of my growing up, of my memory of like my teachers went on strike. I remember that teacher strike, right? I remember how long it lasted. I remember what they were striking for. So this idea.
But aren't they all right to work states?
Now, but they weren't.
They weren't then? Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, because there is obviously continued poverty in great sections of Appalachia.
Absolutely.
So, and the government can do something about that.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm wondering is we talked about Arlie Hartschild's book about Louisiana and how this most polluted state in the nation, and the petrochemical plants that you talked about, people said they know they're dying of cancer with the petrochemicals, but they want the jobs anyway.
That's right.
Because they need the jobs.
That's right.
So what are the politics about those kinds of things that you remember growing up that leads to not getting the kind of action you want? I mean, Joe Manchin, the senator from West Virginia, we talked about him before we went on the air. He's Mr. Coal, 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 coal. And those are very dangerous, unhealthy jobs.
Well, and they've become more so because most of the mines in West Virginia and Kentucky are now privately held, right? I don't think you can ignore the erosion of labor unions, and that has been enacted by the left and the right in this country. That is driven by money. And so there have been, when you look at the mine collapses that have happened, they are almost exclusively in non-union mines.
Yeah.
And so I think that, I think Appalachia has been poorly served by people on the left and the right. You have to go back to LBJ to see a president who stood in that position and said, I actually want to extend any resources to Appalachia in a meaningful way. When Hillary Clinton went in 2016 to Appalachia and said to people, get over it, coal's not coming back, that's not how you help people transition to something else, right? There is real grief.
Well, in fairness, she did talk about transition too, even though it was a muted part of the thing. So how does this change? I hate to sound so anal about it, but it seems to me the way presidents are elected almost guarantees that the attention that you believe that part of the world demands won't happen because they're not real contests. So.
Well, I think they could be. I think the Democratic Party has stopped fighting for rural America. I think they've decided that is not the most expedient path to victory, so they don't bother. But that doesn't mean that, when you said those places are really red, there actually is a lot of blue in those places.
Well, it's Andy Bashir, so you're a fan of Kentucky.
Come on, Kentucky. And Eastern Kentucky is blue, 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 right? When you look at the electoral map at just that surface level, yes, it looks red, but when you get into it, Kentucky's a really interesting example.
So why are they writing it off? When you have a guy like Walz who talks about some of the same values that matter to you and your former neighbors and does talk about this communal thing, which obviously is so alien to Donald Trump. I think even his supporters know he doesn't give a damn about anybody except himself. Does that pierce that wall that I think exists that you say is vulnerable or no?
I hope so. I think that choosing Walz to me feels like choosing to fight for every vote. That's why you don't pick Shapiro. That's why you don't pick Kelly. Because, that would guarantee you Pennsylvania, or guarantee you Arizona, but maybe you already have those anyway. And also, this is symbolic. It's saying, people in small places matter. Their experiences matter. We need to consider their needs, too. We can't just have a political strategy that is based on going to blue states and going to big cities and calling it a day. We have to fight for all of America, right? It was Eisenhower who said, I'm a president for all of the people. That's the last time I feel like I've heard someone say that in quite that way, of just saying, I have to fight on behalf of everybody. I have to consider everyone in this.
But Nima, what is it that the kinds of things does that area need to deal with the poverty? Like I said before, government can make a difference. So what What is that attention?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Walt is interesting in this way because he has actually helped in Minnesota to make a pretty strong transition away from coal into clean energy. So I think you need that as one thing. You need a real clear plan. How are we training people? How are we supporting people and making that transition? How are we making West Virginia and Appalachia in general like a place for that?
And how much was West Virginia stymied by the guy that was the senator?
Jim Justice.
And
Manchin.
Manchin.
Manchin was the governor, wasn't he the governor before he was senator?
Yes, and then Jim Justice, the current governor, is also a coal baron, right?
Yeah.
Money is talking very loud and all of that.
So when people vote for them, it's because they have done well, even though it's a very dangerous and very unhealthy job with the coal. I mean, why do people keep voting for coal people in West Virginia?
I think that I don't think the national picture is like, well, I think in the case of Manchin, like it's such a small, like West Virginia is such a small state, right?
Yeah.
Relationships matter, and he had them, right?
Yeah.
I think Justice represents the thing that like people want, like they want that affluence. He runs, I don't know if you know, but the Greenbrier, which is this like massive.
I've heard of it.
Hotel resort. It's now in bankruptcy and being sold off, which
I didn't know that.
He represents a kind of affluence that I think it's not, people aspire to. And I think in some ways they think, well, if he can do that, like maybe he can help our state to emerge from this. There is a really compelling candidate running against him, Steve Williams, who's the mayor of Huntington, West Virginia, who's done a ton to address the opioid crisis, really proactively thinking about harm reduction, thinking about supports for families, thinking about care for children, right? You need like a multi-pronged approach. It requires a lot of resources and a lot of strategy. And I don't feel like anyone outside of Appalachia is attending to the urgency there. Central Appalachia in particular sits at the crux of every crisis that we have in this country. Climate change, opioids, mass incarceration. Central Appalachia incarcerates more people than anywhere else in the world, right? They're all there. And so if you could solve the problems of Appalachia, you would actually solve the problems everywhere. If you put the most vulnerable place at the center, we would fix so much. But instead what we've done is take the most vulnerable place and say, well, those aren't people, right? J.D. Vance says, those aren't people. They're useless. They're worthless. Like, we don't need to even think about them. And so they've just gotten shunted out of the conversation instead of being centered in it.
Before you go, you know what you and Joe Manchin have in common? I hate to hurt your feelings.
We're both from Kanawha County. What else?
No, he probably had the most positive statement about Tim Walz being added to the ticket of anybody in American politics.
He did.
For some of the exact same reasons you're talking about.
Yeah, I saw that. I was
Nima, hold up your book so that if people want to get it, they see. Hold it up in front of you and the camera can get a shot.
Before you do go, I have one more question I should know the answer to.
Bless you.
Excuse me, but I don't.
For me too.
How did Appalachia make out with the chips stuff? Do they get any one of those chips factories that Gina Raimondo was pushing, the chips bill?
That's a good question.
Like Ohio got, and
I'm sure. I mean, yes, I think, but I don't know specifically.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have been, sorry for sneezing. It happens. We've been speaking with Nisha of Vashia. She is an Indian American, from an Indian American family, and was part of an extremely narrow minority in West Virginia, a place that she told us about, where she grew up with, that you were either black or white in two camps. The name of the book is Another Appalachia, Growing Up Queer and Indian in a Mountain Place. Another Appalachia, Growing Up Queer and Indian in a Mountain Place. Up next, we're going to talk with Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Young. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
A new album called History of House reimagines 50 years of house music, translated and sung in Zulu by South Africa's Soweto Gospel Choir.
We brought the Zulu in it. We brought the traditional and the culture of the South African feel in it.
I'm Ari Shapiro, a reimagination of dance music on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Barrett Tree Service East. Their team of arborists and plant healthcare professionals provides sustainable management for the care of trees, plants, and lawns in the communities where they live and serve. Learn more at barretttreeeast.com. And the Museum of Science with Survival of the Slowest, a new live animal exhibit.
Every day, we have promised you that until the legislature acts like grown-ups and does what they're supposed to, which is pass and consider legislation rather than take a 5-month vacation, we'd highlight one of the important things they left behind. And the reason I mention this is because Shirley Leung has written brilliantly about this outrageous system about liquor licenses in Boston. The Senate had a bill that had a measure that included 260 new alcoholic beverage licenses in Boston. The House version, 205. You would think they'd split the difference, maybe 230. Instead, they went home, and that means that mostly low-income and communities of color that have few, if any, liquor licenses, which are key to successful restaurant businesses, go without, Marjorie. Again, and only 2% of the 1,400 plus liquor licenses in Boston right now are held by black-owned businesses. They decided that wasn't important enough to deal with.
This is just another disgrace, if you ask me, that the legislature gets away with year after year after year. They're not going to meet in formal session. They're supposedly going to come back sooner than that. We haven't really heard when they're coming back.
Yep.
But if they don't do a special session and come back to full session earlier than that, it's going to be January before they come back, right?
And start all over again.
And start all over again. So people are going to go out of business between then. Shirley's...
Well, let me introduce her first, and she has a thought on this.
Shirley's itching to say something.
This is Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Leung and host of the Say More with Shirley Leung podcast. Hello, Shirley.
Hi.
What do you want to say about this? Hi.
Well, I wanted to show you how time is money.
Yeah.
Right? So August 1st was the end of the session, the formal session, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what's been happening is that, we've been writing all year that the legislature might create, 200 more licenses.
Yeah.
So some entrepreneurs have been going in front of the city licensing board to try to get approved and then wait for a license for the city to issue licenses. So just since August 1st, there have been 3 more small businesses that have been approved by the licensing board for a liquor license, and yet will not get one because they're still waiting for the legislature to create new licenses. So there are currently 11 applicants who have been approved for licenses, but they're pending new licenses that that the city can issue. And meanwhile, we've been writing about how if you wanted a license, you could actually buy a license, right? When the city doesn't have new licenses again, you can buy a license, but it costs about $600,000 because you need to buy it from another restaurant that's closed. And so a lot of these businesses are in Dorchester, they're in the neighborhoods, Jamaica Plain, East Boston, they're waiting for a license.
And you know something, I'm old enough to remember Diane Wilkerson a million years ago, who used to be a state senator. She got in a little hot water, but she was pushing for this, 30 years ago to get starting on
Ayanna
this
Pressley
liquor
after her,
license.
a lot
Ayanna
of
Pressley
people.
after constantly. The need is enormous. This legislature got nothing to do with having, this should just be about Boston's business. I thought that the Senate president was rather rude in her response to Michelle Wu's concern, because Michelle Wu was trying to get these liquor licenses for people here, and why we have to wait for this do-nothing legislature.
We should be clear, the one incident in which she was particularly rude, she was rude by not addressing her concerns. Right. The individual thing that Wu was talking about today with us when the next day Senate President Spilka was about the property tax reclassification.
Right. Well, it's another thing.
But I agree, it's another thing. In any case,
same principle.
Read Shirley's pieces. They are brilliant, and they explain brilliantly the problem and the inequity in this whole system, which is a perfect segue to your most recent piece, which was #1 on the Globe almost all day yesterday. Restaurants in trouble. One of the things that gets restaurants out of trouble, some restaurants, are liquor licenses, by the way, but even some with them are having a hard time. Fill in the blanks there, if you would.
So as I've been watching the stock market like a lot of people, and it's been going up and down, and people are wondering, it is a recession around the corner. And so I was talking to my editor about it. I said, well, how do we take the temperature of how consumers are feeling? And he said, well, you should talk to restaurants, because one of the first things, going out to eat is incredibly discretionary. So if people are nervous about the economy, the one thing they do is cut back on eating out. And sure enough, when I talked to restaurants, they said, yes, we have noticed a slight pullback. No one talked to me about, I think a recession is happening, but there is something different in the last 3 to 6 months this year. Habits are changing. People aren't eating out as often. If someone is eating out, used to come to the restaurant 3 times a month, they're coming 2 times a month. Maybe they're, instead of having a full dinner, appetizer, entree, dessert. They're just coming in for drinks and appetizers to save a little money. And so the restaurant owners are watching this trend very carefully.
You know what's interesting? I mean, this morning we learned inflation rate was lowest, 2.9%. I think it's been in 3 years. Consumer confidence was up yesterday or the day before in some poll. So it lags clearly. What we see in surveys, when there's more positivity, a word I hate, I don't know why I'm using that, but positive feeling about things lags behind what people do because they're still anxious that it may be a short-term kind of fix.
And what's interesting because a lot of the restaurant owners talked about the election. They said that people are really nervous of it. They're nervous about the election. They're nervous about they're looking at the menu prices and how high it is. And it's like maybe thinking twice about eating out. Like I love this example up in Newburyport. The owner of Brine, which is a seafood restaurant, and she was saying that she no longer has scallops.
That was incredible.
As part of her
because she said
menu.
she would have had to charge $4, $50 for 4 scallops.
For 4 scallops, and people would be like, she would alienate her customers.
So she took it off the menu.
She took it off the menu.
That was a great anecdote.
She only brings it back on as a special.
What's her name again?
It's Nancy Caswell.
Yeah.
And then same thing at Shanti, which is an Indian restaurant in Dorchester and Rosendale. They took goat off the menu.
I saw that
last year because it's too expensive. She was saying that she would have to charge $25 for an entree, and the other entrees are like $18 to $19. And so she just I didn't make it into the story, but she co-owns the restaurant with her husband, and she's like, the person most upset is my husband because he loves goat. That's his favorite dish, and we had to take it off the menu. So,
but one of the things. I mean, we talked with Corby Kummer about this, about how the wealth should be shared. It shouldn't just be the wait staff that gets the tips, and you want to have everybody get a living wage. But the problem with everybody getting a living wage is obviously the cost of the food is going to go way up. So when you go out to a restaurant, I don't go out like you do all the time, but I was stunned.
To me, not
I was stunned last night when I went out for dinner, just my son and I, and it was over $100.
Yes, that's pretty typical. And then also kitchen fees.
That was without any liquor.
Right. And people talk about everyone there's these kitchen appreciation fees, about 2%. A lot of people complain about that.
Right. So it's really, and the margins are very tiny in restaurants. The place they make money is on the liquor, and of course that gets back to our original point about the liquor licenses being withheld. I mean, these restaurants are going to go out of business.
Well, we've been saying this for years, beginning with COVID, patronize your local independent restaurants for a lot of reasons, including weathering the storm. So can we talk about another storm? Another disgrace on the state level is we go from the early stages of the Cannabis Control Commission. We used to have the chair on all the time, other members of the other commissioners who were always available. And it was clearly a startup, but it was doing a lot of things, urging the legislature to fix and improve the law where there were some problems identified. And now, since Deb Goldberg, who's the treasurer, decided that Shannon O'Brien, as the chair, had done some horrible things, which I have to say, as a consumer of the stories about this, I am not convinced at all that a case has been made against Shannon O'Brien. The thing is basically disintegrating before our eyes in a multi-billion-dollar industry here.
It is. I mean, Shannon O'Brien is, I guess, suspended. Her case is still going through the legal system.
It's going through the legal system now for what? At least
a year.
It's
it's all, as of the moment, it is in Goldberg's hands.
Yes.
She's waiting and waiting.
For what?
I have no idea.
And then the current acting chair, she's pregnant and going on medical leave unexpectedly. I think there's been a revolving door of staff, and meanwhile you have a lot of small business owners who are waiting. They're waiting for a license, and you hear this. You've heard this almost from the beginning, right? That there's so much regulation. A lot of times they have to find a space. They are paying rent for space for a long time, for many months before they can open.
Well, there was also those extortionary deals that were foisted upon some of these by some cities and towns, and then of course your former mayor went to the can.
Went to jail.
As a result of this from Fall River.
But you can see why small business owners, don't want any regulation on their businesses, because when they're so ruinous, as these, it's ridiculous. Right?
Well,
and you know what people do? They vote for Donald Trump.
Well, let me just say, for whatever it's worth, in this instance, following the urging of the Cannabis Control Commission, administration before it imploded, the legislature did make some changes for once and actually improved the law, reduced some of the more burdensome stuff. But until you have leaders, there should be pressure on the treasurer to make a damn decision.
With nobody able to afford the rent, having to pay rent for weeks and months.
I know.
How do you possibly do that, waiting for some action? I don't know how you do that.
And they end up giving up.
They end up giving
moving
up.
on and doing
How about
something
people
else.
waiting for a liquor license? We just heard a few minutes ago.
It's the
I know
same
it is.
thing.
Yeah.
Okay, can we go to my
I
favorite
think things
topic
are running
of the day?
really well here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That's all I can say.
Well, and the governor should put pressure on the legislative leaders
And
on
she
Goldberg
has,
to make
but,
a decision.
Around CCC, yes, on the Cannabis Commission.
So, Shirley Leung, there was a millionaire's tax on the ballot, which you were sort of queasy about. I happen to support.
The business community was up in
and
arms
the
against
proponent
it.
said it was going to raise $2 billion. And the business community and all these accountants who would never name a name say, oh, now this thing is going to pass, and when it passes, all these rich people are leaving the state. Then it did pass. And every accountant that you or somebody interview, I can't name names, but they're all leaving the state. And that'll be evidenced by the fact that they're never going to raise as much money as they said. It's going well below. Well, they suggested, the proponents, it would raise $2 billion. It only raised $2.2 billion in the first year. And I don't know if it was your story, whoever wrote the story in the Globe, now the business leaders are saying, wait till next year.
That's saying that is true.
And you know what's going to happen next year? Wait till next year.
Yeah.
The bottom line is the thing is a huge success. It is raising $1 billion plus each or not exactly, for transportation and education that would otherwise not be available. You ready to give up now?
Well, I do hear that a lot.
Oh, you do?
We know that there is an exodus.
Yeah. How do we know that exactly?
We see in the census numbers. I mean, whether or not we do see an exodus. But you're right. It doesn't make sense. If there's an exodus, how come
they're raising even more money?
Right, raising more money. So there is something doesn't quite add up. But I actually had to look at the old clips because there was a huge debate back when this was on the ballot whether or not the Millionaires Initiative would actually raise $2 billion. And a lot of the opponents were like, oh, no, that's not right.
The opponents?
Yeah, the opponents.
Because everybody's going to move out of state, allegedly, right.
But in fact, well, it's not worth it. It was kind of the idea is it's overblown that this one initiative will raise $2 billion, but the forecast, the supporters of it, they're right on the money.
Right
I
on
mean,
the money.
$2 billion,
So to speak.
at least. I think last year they were on forecast too. I think for 2 years in a row.
It was only half a year last year. I can't remember. It was only half a year.
They were pretty on the mark.
You know, not
at least
to mention
2 years.
that we had one of the most regressive income taxes because it was flat in the country by raising the rate, the 4% surcharge. And by the way, we had a guest the other day who shall not be mentioned because about a month ago she didn't understand how the law worked. This is on money over $1 million in income, not wealth.
Right.
Income annually, it affects a very limited number of people, and I started to say, and makes the system much more equitable and progressive because wealthier people are paying at a higher rate than low and middle income people. So I guess we'll just have to wait till next year to when all those businesses.
That's right.
By the way,
I need to check in with my accountants.
Why don't
again.
you check in with your accountant? But why are these accountants not naming names if all these people are allegedly leaving Massachusetts? Could it be because they don't exist? Is that?
No,
Is
I
that
think they
possible?
exist.
They
well,
do?
I don't know, but we should follow up. You're right.
Okay,
We should
let's do
follow
that.
We'll
up.
do a search.
We'll just go
search
to I just need to go to New Hampshire and Florida. That's
right.
allegedly that's where everyone is
Search
going.
for billionaires who've left town.
Right.
But the point
I'll look
is,
for the mansions.
On a serious
That's
note
right.
here, even if some people, I'm sure there's some people who are leaving because of the tax, it's not having the effect that its opponents were concerned about, as evidenced by the amount of money that's being raised. So if some people are leaving, I feel bad about that. We don't want to lose anybody.
Well, didn't you see the story in the Globe the other day talking about all the suburbs now around Boston? They're tearing down the houses and putting up
That's right.
huge mansions.
Yes,
because these beautiful homes and the Needhams and the Wellesley's, I guess, aren't good enough or whatever.
Yeah,
They're building those right before they move to Florida, by the way. That's what they're doing.
And I think to buy a house in Wellesley now, God, don't they start at about $1.5 million or something
I'm
like
sure
that?
they do. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So they're still here, but the $1.5 million houses aren't good enough. We have to have a $5 million house.
So, Shirley, there's a story by Scott Kurser.
We should have gone into finance,
in the
Shirley.
Globe about a secret lab near where I live.
Secret lab.
Oh, it's near you.
It is near me, and it's sort of scary.
And he's very concerned about it.
Why are you concerned
What is
about
going
it?
on in this place?
It's just like behind it doesn't even have a sign, right? And it's got a very kind of generic name, Applied Invention. And there's a lot of, it's run by a guy who did a lot for the iPhone, and they're doing. I'm reading Scott Kersner's story here. A mechanical clock designed to last 10,000 years.
Yeah.
Small torpedo-like underwater drones to gather data from beneath the surface of the ocean, and so. But Scott, it looks like. He's been trying to crack this case.
Well, I mean, that's what makes me nervous. The guys, one of the executives calls him on the phone, I guess after he's done the reporting, says, don't mention anybody, don't tell them how many people work here, who they are, whatever. I mean, doesn't that, you're both laughing, doesn't that make you look, and he talks about some huge robot that's in the room.
But that's that world.
Have you seen him walking around in the square?
I remember my cousin used to work at Apple. He's one of these software engineers.
Is he a zillionaire?
And probably.
Okay.
And I just remember he worked at one level of Apple where, the top secret, invention part of Apple. And if you walked into his office and he would have like a black cloth and he would cover his desk.
Is that really true?
Yeah, that's what my cousin was telling. He covered. Actually, I don't know. I guess I didn't. I assume it was true. I assume I should. I'm going to see my cousin this Saturday. I'm
be
gonna
nice
ask
to him, Shirley.
But he's no longer at Apple. He's at another company. But he's
still covering his desk, though.
Perhaps. I mean, because he works on the future.
Well, they're all in a race now, right? Microsoft and Apple.
They're
and
always
Meta
in a race
to get the best, to be the Google of AI.
Yeah,
Isn't that
they're
what
always
all
in
doing?
a race.
Yeah.
They're always very competitive,
Very
secretive.
Can I also, you know what's an interesting exercise? I made a huge mistake last night. I didn't even tell you this. I listened to an hour and 15 minutes of the Musk and talk about
with
Masters
Donald
of
Trump,
the Universe with Trump. When you listen to this, if you didn't know who the, quote, non-Trumpian was, and someone said to you afterwards, how successful do you think this guy is in whatever he does for a living? People would say, I think you'd say the guy's going to have a hard time getting a job. When you listen to Elon Musk and realize that on one hand, in fairness, one of the most creative, innovative thinkers of our time,
SpaceX is pretty impressive.
to Tesla, to the utter cluelessness and his inability, in my opinion, to communicate in an insightful, and I know he wanted to give softballs to Trump. It's stunning that this is the richest man in the world, which has nothing to do with this. So let's move back to Earth and something you wrote brilliantly about not too long ago, the Fairmont line.
Oh, yes.
Tell us what you write and tell us what happened yesterday.
Right. So I wrote a piece last fall about how I love the Fairmont line. It's this 9-mile stretch, a commuter rail that goes through the city of Boston, starts in Reedville and Hyde Park and ends at South Station. It's a 25-minute commute, always on time. I love it. And yesterday was a big day for the Fairmont line. It was a real gathering of, the governor was there, the mayor was there, Phil Eng, the TGM, and members of the MBTA board, also the transportation secretary, Monica Tibbetts-Nuts, and all these activists. And so it was kind of the formal kind of kickoff and celebration of the Fairmont line being the first electrified, commuter rail, and it would be run on battery-powered trains. And so if you imagine, these are diesel trains going through the backyards of vast parts of the Black community in Boston, and now they can have a clean, faster trains going through their community. And they're hoping to do it by 2028. I mean, that's incredible, in 4 years.
Well, that's good news. Can we go back to your original story, though, which I remember to this day? One, I remember that virtually nobody with whom you spoke said it was ever late, ever.
Right.
Two, that one of the fondest, most loving of the line riders was former Governor Bill Weld, who moved from Cambridge. Remember we did the event outside his house that night when we thought Michael Moore was going to meet us and never
that was when he
showed up.
Fairweather Street.
On Fairweather Street. Now he lives in Canton and takes this thing. But the third thing that was so heartbreaking, tell the story that you told there about people living in the neighborhood years ago.
Yes, they talked about yesterday.
Watching the line running by.
So the activists, and they shared these stories again yesterday, which is so moving. It's like a 45-minute event. We're all sitting in the sun listening to it. But they've been working on reactivating the Fairmont for probably more than 3 decades. And there were all these activists there who remember as little kids growing up, they would see the train pass through their neighborhood, but not stop.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, they would go just from Reedville to South Station, and that's it. And yesterday they talked about how one activist talked about how she remembers the circus would carry the freight trains would go on this line. They'd carry the circus animals, and so they were like, the animals got to ride the train, but not us, not us. And so they fought for years to create stops. Right, so they got many stops. The Fairmont, so they created stations, and or actually there used to be stations, and then they reactivated them in the last 20 years, and then they even talked about Mike Capuano yesterday, former congressman, got the $1 billion for the Green Line extension. Right, and so he was a champion of the Fairmont. They were talking about all the people like from Menino to Capuano to so many people.
He was beaten by Ayanna Pressley.
But he championed. They remember that he championed the Fairmont because for a while nobody was riding it because it was fairly new. So he made it free. He said, let's make it free for a period. And now they were talking about yesterday. So when I wrote about yesterday, it was probably the only commuter line, the rail line that had exceeded pre-pandemic numbers. And yesterday they said it was like 160% of pre-pandemic numbers.
Wow.
So it is really, a lot of people are riding the Fairmont. I mean, in part because the Red Line has been such a disaster.
In part because of your piece.
Right.
I'm serious.
Perhaps, but Red Line has been such a disaster. So I'm a Red Line defector. I mean, now I just don't trust it. I don't know what. I mean, there's still, long lead times. Maybe when you show up, you might have to wait 15 minutes for the next train.
Do we still think Phil Eng is the Ted Lasso of the MBTA?
I do. I think he's still
grinding away.
He is.
Before Shirley tells us what's on the podcast, who's on the podcast this week, I've told you this story before. When you mentioned, the circus animals going by, when I lived in New York City, one of the great thrills, and I hate how cruel these circuses were to animals, if you walked over to 42nd Street, all the way over to the river where the train yards are, they would unload the circuses, all the animals, and march them across 42nd Street, I think to 9th Avenue, I'm not sure, and walk them down to Madison Square Garden. So you would literally be standing on a sidewalk on the west side of Manhattan, and you'd see elephants. I know it's cruel. I know it's cruel.
But Jim loved it. It's really cruel, but he thought it was swell.
No, think about it. In a city, a huge city like New York, it was a beautiful scene, even though it's cruel, so I shouldn't have brought it up.
They've outlawed it since then.
They have, and they should, by the way, but that was then. This is now. What's on the podcast? Who's on the podcast?
We have Nate Silver on. He's on
Mr.
tomorrow.
Former 538.
Yeah, he's got a book. It's about it's called On the Edge. It's on the art of taking risks or the art of risk taking. And
he's a poker player,
right? So what happened was he's a professional. He had a consulting job. He used to play, and then he was playing online poker, and he made more money playing poker than at his consulting job, and then he quit it. And then he loved playing poker. That's his first love. And then members of Congress changed the rules, and so then he couldn't play on. Like there was something. I don't know if it's online poker became illegal at that point or something, but some rule changed, and he got. Then that's how he got into political forecasting, because he got into politics. And he's like, who are these people who made my livelihood go away?
Who does he say? I believe he said recently Biden wouldn't win when Biden was a candidate. What's his take on Harris? I mean, you don't have to give it away.
Right? No. I can. He now has his own Substack called Silver Bulletin. So he still has a hand in political forecasting. And for more than a year, he was telling anyone who would listen, there is no way Biden has to drop out. He can't win.
Long before the debate.
Over a year ago. And so now his polls show that Harris with a small lead. But the one big takeaway, I said, well, I mean, I said, well, are the polls better? Because in 2016 they were so off when Trump won that time, and he said, listen, the new normal. It's national elections are going to be really close. You can't be complacent, and also the polls they aren't better. You should anticipate some kind of polling error in a close election. So, I mean, my take was
he was very far off.
Well,
from the Clinton race, he was
very far off.
Well,
I remember looking at his polls and thinking, wow.
But in his defense, right, and he's talked about it, the other polls had the race pretty much a lock for Clinton. His polls showed there was a 30% chance that Trump would win. So he was off.
He was less wrong.
He was less right. He was less wrong.
So he says.
And so, but
when's this drop, by the way?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, okay.
So, but it's great. He has a new book out, but he was great, and he's still really into, talking about politics, even though he's no longer with 538, and he talks about kind of the people who take risks, the people who take risks, like Elon Musk, and how they make money, and they often are also poker players too. So he talks about this community called the River. We know a lot of these people in Boston too, who are very data driven, take a lot of risks in business, made a lot of money.
Like who?
I don't know. All the venture capitalists in town. They fit in that mold.
All the people working in that secret lab in Central Square.
Right, exactly. No, I'm thinking for me, I was thinking Steve Pagliuca, at Bain Capital. I was thinking of, John Henry at the Boston Globe. I mean, these are quants who made a lot of money.
Fenway Sports Group is now involved allegedly in the bidding, or will be involved in the bidding for the Celtics. Is there in your world, is there an inside edge to anybody?
No, I don't think there is. I mean, I think the Celtics doesn't. Celtics is a marquee team. I mean, I think anybody who has money and who's interested in owning a sports team will pull the term sheets on it and take a look.
Shirley, it's good to see you. By the way, I heard a little bit of when you were sitting in last week. You were great with Marjorie.
Oh, thanks. It was fun.
We had a lot of fun.
We had a lot of fun. Estrogen surge.
That's right. We got a lot of nice comments about you too, Shirley. So there you go.
Thanks
if anything happens to Jim, we know you're there.
That's really nice. That's really nice.
Only kidding, of course. We have been speaking.
What kind of person says that? Really?
Only kidding.
Okay.
We've been speaking with Shirley Young. You can say if something happens to me.
Oh, well, I didn't say it, did I? That's the difference.
Your closest colleague,
exactly.
Jim.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Shirley Young is a Boston Globe business columnist and host of the Say More podcast, and you have a great podcast. I love your podcast. And it's going to be the guy from 538 tomorrow.
Nate
formerly of 538.
Nate Silver, formerly
no
of 538. Right. That's right. Up next, we'll talk about the benefits of the great outdoors and zero screen time at summer camp. It's getting near the end of the summer, but from what I've read, you better start planning now for your kids' summer camp for next year, or maybe you want to go to an adult summer camp. We're going to speak with Frances McLaughlin. She's executive director of a long-running Vermont summer camp program that aims to bring people together in community through nature and simple living. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News.
This week on Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, for 6 decades, one jazz album has been the gold standard. Miles Davis's revolutionary record, Kind of Blue, continues to influence artists of all ages and all genres. Why? A special hour-long celebration of Kind of Blue. That's Under the Radar with me, Callie Crossley, tonight at 9 here on 89.7 GBH and the GBH app.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Eversource, committed to helping businesses reach sustainability goals and lower their energy use through energy assessments and custom recommendations. Learn more at eversource.com. And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, featuring Andrew Lloyd Webber, Liz Cheney, historian Annette Gordon-Reed, and news anchor Chris Wallace. bostonspeakers.org.
I'm Boston Public Radio producer Aidan Connolly, and you're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you?
Well, welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Regan and Jim Browdy live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Back here on Friday with the Boston Lyric Opera. I didn't know that. That's great. Last year, the Surgeon General issued a warning about teens and social media use at a pivotal time for brain development. Being online and tied to a phone can have some really negative impacts on self-esteem and mental health. and more. There may be no better way to combat that than shipping your kid off to summer camp for weeks on end. We're joined now by Francis McLaughlin, who's Executive Director of Farm and Wilderness Camps in Vermont, and Ollie Muse, he's a former camper and camp counselor at Farm and Wilderness, talk about the benefits of being in nature, electronics-free. And by the way, for those who are saying, why are you talking about this in August? I think Marjorie nailed it. Unless you start early, as I'm sure they'll tell us, you're going to be locked out of the system. Francis and Ollie, it's great to see you both. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very
pleasure.
much for coming.
Yeah, we're excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you both for coming in. But Francis, let's start with you. Yes. I mean, I want to go to your camp.
Me too.
Tell us about it. The goats and the flowers and the garden and the farm and the whole deal. What's going on up there in Vermont?
So Farm and Wilderness, it's our 85th anniversary this year. It was started by a couple of progressive educators who wanted to create a much more immersive and simple outdoor camp experience for kids. This was when our part of Vermont, that's still pretty dang rural, was even more so. So we're located between, if you are a skier, between Okemo and Killington, not far from Woodstock, but in a very narrow valley that is just gorgeous. It's when you're there, you know why we call it the Green Mountains.
But there's some principles, or it's mission driven. What are the sort of core concepts that guide your work there?
So I think of them in two ways. One, we're a very values-based camp, which is why I ended up coming there as the executive director 4 years ago. The values are those Quaker values that some of us have heard about in different contexts: simplicity, peace, integrity, community, equity, and sustainability. I don't think of them as strictly for Quakers. These are good human values, right? And they are especially good as we think of what it means to develop young people and what they need to know about who they are and how they relate to the world. The other part of Farm and Wilderness that is so, so important is this idea of really immersing yourself in nature, to be one with, as much as possible, the elements. So our cabins are three-sided, more akin to shelters than cabins, no windows, no doors. Our kids participate in trips, they do barn chores, they work on conservation activities. We have a conservation agency that oversees kind of conservation and good management of almost 5,000 acres.
And no electronics.
No electronics.
So when did you start there, Ollie?
My first summer was in 2013 when I was 9.
Why did your parents send you there?
I think they wanted me to get off my computer, and we found out about it through friends, and I was interested in it, and they wanted to kind of kindle like an interest in outdoors.
Did you resist as a 9-year-old when they told you no electronics?
No, I think I was pretty interested from the outset. It was definitely an adjustment period. But I ended up coming back. My first summer I went for 10 days on like an intro program, and then I came back the next 4 years for 6 weeks every summer, and I've been on staff now for 3 years.
Well, you know, one of the things that I think is maybe it's not unique, but it sounds like an emphasis, is talking about kids who LGBTQ kids, trans kids who may have had some hassles in school or even in their families. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we are truly a welcoming and inclusive camp in all the ways that we can imagine, and that's changed over time as young people have grown and changed. So we are really working with parents as well as our campers themselves and staff to ensure that we are welcoming to kids who are coming from a variety of socioeconomic backgrounds. Camps like ours have tended to be more the preserve of families with greater socioeconomic means. We're really trying to kind of shift that model.
How are you shifting it?
We have a program called Affordable for All. It is really the way that other families, Ollie's families, my family, can support all kids getting to camp. So we have not a sliding scale for tuition, but truly you can go online. If you make $25,000 a year, you can go online and see how much camp is going to cost. And if you make $25,000 a year, camp is going to cost you nothing. And it goes all the way up to family incomes of $200,000 and above.
So what was it that got you when you were a little 9-year-old that you wanted to go back? Was it the friends? Was it the activities? Was it helping with the goats? Was it helping with the farm? What was it?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it's really all of it, right? I think every time when I would leave, I would have a really difficult transition back into the real world, because that way of living, like in an intentional outdoor community, unplugged, off devices, forming close relationships, that way of living just felt so right to me. I didn't care what we were doing. I didn't care what area I was in. Just being there with those people and being in a community that was held that way just is like the right way for me to live.
And what was
by the way,
different?
he's saying almost the exact same thing Nima was saying about
but
growing up in Appalachia
yeah.
at noon.
And what was different about the summer experience with no electronics to when you went back to school in the fall?
I think I'm still dealing with that difference every year when I go back to school, right? And I think living in a community, right, where we have a common goal that we're working towards, we're sustaining our own community. We don't hire people to come do our dishes. We don't have janitors. We clean up after ourselves. We have kids get in the kitchen and do the dishes with the Hobart. And I think just having a collective effort to sustain a community really like brings you close to one another. Whereas I go back to school and I'm in the outside world and we have much more individualistic kind of aims.
And one more thing about this, because how old are you now, Oliver?
I'm 21.
You're 21. Okay, I got a daughter who's 29 who started camp at Y Camp when she was 9. This weekend, she's going to New York to visit friends from camp from like 25 years ago, because some of her closest friendships have been with the kids that she got friendly with in camp. So is that true for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because you like are put in uncomfortable situations together, right? You have to like not always do exactly what you want to do. Sometimes you have to like do chores together. Sometimes you're going to walk. We do trips, right? We do backpacking trips every session. And you bond from that. We call it type 2 fun, right? Like experiences that might not be fun while you're having them, but when you look back on it with friends, you know, those are the memories that you cherish.
So Francis, can we get back to this Quaker deal for a second?
Sure.
I went to a Quaker school for 4 years, as I think I said, it was K through 12. The headmaster was a Quaker. His son or daughter, I can't remember, was a Quaker. Every other kid in the school was not a Quaker, including me. However, there was this thing that I thought was ridiculous before I got there that really changed.
Silent meeting.
Well, silent meeting.
Yeah.
So do you do that?
Yeah, we do.
Explain what that is for the few people who don't know.
So it is a gathering of folks. We do it outside in almost all weather at each of our camps. So we have 5 camps that are just wrapping up this weekend. And then we have a family camp for grown-ups.
We want to talk about that in a minute.
We do. Each camp has a designated place for the ritual of silent meeting. And that, it varies in length from 20 minutes to half an hour, 40 minutes. And truly, everyone is sitting in silence. And we're working, even at our day camp, with 4- and 5-year-olds, helping them understand what it means to just sit and to breathe and to look at everything around you. And then folks can speak, as the Quakers would say, the spirit moves them.
Or not.
Or not. So some meetings are, and Ollie can tell you about his experience. I've been in meetings where no one says a word. Mm-hmm. I've also been in meetings where one person speaks. And one of the things we ask, and this is a great teaching opportunity for kids and really for all of us, we're so used to getting ready to respond to what you say, right? If you speak, we ask that folks wait and imagine what you said dropping like a pebble in water, and until all the rings are gone, give it that time to land, and then someone else may speak, may say something kind of related to the first speaker, but not necessarily.
Well, obviously, I'll never be there based upon that criterion. So, Ollie, what was the meeting like for you? Did you know anything about it before you went there as a kid?
No, I mean, I think it was one of the first times I had been asked to be still in that way, right? I think there aren't a lot of spaces for quiet contemplation for children, especially in a group.
Did you ever say anything?
No, I never spoke. People rarely do. It's actually like once or twice a session someone will, and that's like a 3-week period. Yeah. It's not a common thing. It's if someone really is feeling moved to speak to the community, but almost every meeting is entirely silent. And I just remember looking up at the trees and pausing to really experience the nature that surrounded me in that moment. I think that is largely responsible for kind of like a reverence for nature that I have.
That's great.
Now.
I thought I was going to hate it. As I said, I loved it. I mean, it's so unlike me, and I really loved it.
So many families do. We have one family who wrote to us to say their kids, 2 kids, came home from camp a couple of years ago and wanted to do silent meeting in their family.
house. So tell us about this adult deal.
Yeah.
I mean, this is essentially adults. Almost every adult I know wants to go to camp. And you have a forum for this. What is that?
We are not the only one, but we call it family camp. Family in the most generous understanding of that word. So it could be some siblings over 18 coming. Sometimes it's 2 parents and a child. We have grandparents who bring grandkids or nibblings. And really, what we give them, and it's over a week. So what we tend to see is families whose kids have aged out of camp. And this is a way to stay connected and come back even 20, 30, 40 years later. And it's also a great way for families that really camp wasn't part of their tradition. Maybe being outdoors is not something they're that familiar with. So this is like a stepping stone to see, is this a kind of camp and organization I'd want to send my kids to? So there's waterfront, there's barn chores. There is, we are into work being very much part of how we educate and form communities. So we say work is love made visible. So our adult campers, you'll do dishes. You'll be cutting veggies. Probably veggies that one of your other campmates picked that morning.
That's great.
So after all this time, you must be pretty good at growing things. Get any tomatoes or zucchini up this summer, or what's your deal? Or maybe you're good with the animals.
Yeah, I'm more into the outdoorsy side, the fires and the
bonfires.
Yeah.
Can I say, best? We say we're farm and wilderness, right? Yep. And so one question that folks will ask each other is are you more farm or are you more wilderness? Okay. Ollie, you're more wilderness.
Yeah.
I'm more farm.
Okay, so what wilderness, Ollie?
I mean, just having a baseline kind of comfort in wilderness that I got from a childhood at FNW, knowing how to peel birch bark and start a fire, knowing how to properly set up a tent, right? Knowing how to identify what you can eat in the woods, things like that. These are skills that almost every camper will leave with, and especially if you come for multiple years, you just kind of pick up on it by living in the wilderness, and that is a.
Are you
gift.
a city kid?
Yeah, I'm from Cambridge.
Oh, you are?
Originally, yeah.
Oh, well, that makes it even more interesting.
So you're talking about the right berries and the right mushrooms, that kind of thing? That's pretty cool.
Mushrooms.
So you could survive for a long time out there if you had to.
I think more than the average person.
More than the average person.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can change a tire, by the way. I don't know if you're interested. I can't do any of those things.
So, Francis, you mentioned at the beginning that you can have people can go that
sliding
don't have
scale.
a lot of money. No, not a sliding scale, right?
Yeah, it is a sliding scale.
Well, I think a sliding scale usually has 3 rates, pay this, pay that, pay that. What we really know is that a family's income is going to be the biggest indication of their ability to pay for camp. So we put that right out there. If your family income, we have it by $10,000, $20,000 brackets, and then we tell you what your cost of camp will be.
So what do you do? Do you have fundraisers, or do you have benefactors?
We have benefactors. We fundraise. We have a small endowment. But farm and wilderness, I'd say one of the things that I just find so incredible is how generous our community is, and this affordable for all is just such a tangible way to live into our values, right? We can talk a lot about being an inclusive community and really knowing how good camp is for everyone. We, as a community, also need to put our money where our mouth is and make it affordable.
Well, the reason I ask about that, obviously, is because for a lot of people, we had all these stories about, really sad stories about single mothers who got the kids home for 10 weeks from June to September, and they can't afford to go to a lot of camps. They end up dragging the kids into work because we have these long summer vacations. I mean, that is a big deal.
Can I tell you about one of our partnerships, which is long-standing? The SEIU's chapter, one of their chapters in New York, 1199, has a scholarship program. They had a benefactor. Her name was Ann Shore. She basically endowed a fund for working parents. And at the time that it started, it was mainly working moms who had kids and without a plan for daycare or enrichment over the summer. And so we're one of, I think, a handful of Vermont camps that work with that program. There are lots of programs in New York, New Jersey. We were just talking, Chris's first counselor when he came as a camper was a kid who had come to Farm and Wilderness years before through this scholarship program.
So by the way, we should say farmandwilderness.org is the, if you want to check it out.
So you get a lot of diversity of all sorts. I mean, socioeconomic has to be a big difference of kids coming from tough families financially and other families that weren't so tough.
Let's get to the chase here. I mean, I'm looking at this chart.
What's the chase? What's the chase?
The chase is, it's fabulous for low and moderate income people and affordable. We hear how unaffordable summer camps are every time we do something in the spring. So when and how does someone apply to get here?
We're going to open registration the 15th of October. They can reach out to admissions at farmandwilderness.org now and just get on our mailing list. They can go online and also fill out their contact information. Folks are welcome to come or let us know they'd love to come for a tour.
You have six camps.
Yes. Can I say one more thing?
You may. Sure.
This Saturday, we have an event that we haven't had in 5 years called Fair. It's not the most unique name, but it's a unique event. Basically, it started back in the 40s when the state fairs weren't operating, and it was a way to bring the farm and wilderness camp family campers together. We have human-powered amusement rides. We have demonstrations.
What does that mean?
Truly people pushing people around on a Ferris wheel. There's a ramp into our waterfront. So families can do a lot of the things that our campers do. We have a big contra dance, big bonfire that your camp, Timberlake, is building.
You also have great, whatever that graphic is.
Don't you like it?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It is really
great.
Wait a
minute. You actually have people pushing the Ferris wheel around?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you go do it? You like to camp so much. Why don't you do it?
How many people do we need to get the Ferris wheel around?
A few campers.
Yeah.
Like 2 or 3?
Like 3 or 4, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's
momentum,
incredible.
right? Lesson in physics.
I
so
guess.
It's really, I haven't actually seen it live because I started during the pandemic.
And you eat a lot of the food that you grow there too. That's nothing. So we're not talking a lot of Cheetos or anything like that.
No Cheetos.
Okay, can we get away from your spiritual thing again? Farmandwilderness.org. You can check them out. You can check them out now, and you can October 15th. You can begin to apply. And it is really affordable based on your income. It's fabulous.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Good to meet you both. Thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you both very much for coming.
Thank
It was great to meet you both. We have been speaking with Frances McLaughlin, Executive Director of Farm and Wilderness Camps in Vermont, and there are 6 of them, and Ollie Muse, a former camper and counselor. Thank you again for coming in
Great to meet you both.
and telling us those uplifting stories about camping. For more information, go to farmandwilderness.org. That's farmandwilderness.org. Thanks again to both of you. Coming up next, Boston Globe Love Life advice columnist Meredith Goldstein. She's next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com.
A new album called History of House reimagines 50 years of house music, translated and sung in Zulu by South Africa's Soweto Gospel Choir.
We brought the Zulu in it. We brought the traditional and the culture of the South African feel in it.
I'm Ari Shapiro, a reimagination of dance music on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Boston Children's Museum. From Winnie the Pooh to the outdoor Curiosity Kitchen, you can make this summer special with a visit to Boston Children's Museum. Learn more at bostonchildrensmuseum.org. And Mass General Cancer Center, dedicated to providing compassionate care and cancer specialists who are experienced in the cancer you have. When you hear the word cancer, their team is ready. Learn more at massgeneral.org/cancer.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now.
People here that those camps, and they are based on the Quaker values. And you just spoke about going to a Quaker wedding.
Yeah, so listening to them talk about the experience of being at camp, which, by the way, I'd be a bad camper because of allergies and the lack of wanting to push anyone on a Ferris wheel, it sounds like. But I'm envious of people who go. Years ago, one of the best weddings I've ever been to, not that I'm judging them or ranking them, but was this beautiful Quaker wedding. And we were all instructed, to have this, there was a room full of silence and honoring this couple getting married, and we were told, let's sit with our thoughts, and you speak if something comes to you, just like they were talking about. And I watched everyone in the room be so uncomfortable with that and almost competitive, standing up as if as a spirit had moved them, myself included. And what you wound up with was a bunch of non-Quaker people giving wedding toasts.
Yeah.
And it was just really interesting to me after the fact to sit down, with the bride, my friend, and say we weren't really ready to be quiet on your behalf and to think about this union ourselves. And it's just such a fascinating thing to be put in a different situation for communication.
Yeah, my oldest son went to a Quaker school, Haverford, down outside of Pennsylvania, and they had these services every Sunday where that's what they do. You just go into this room with this huge fireplace, like about 15 feet high, about 15 feet wide. You heard the crackling wood, and people sat there for an hour.
Well, let's not go overboard. Richard Nixon was a Quaker too, so I mean
he resigned.
The good and the bad.
He at least had enough shame
not
to
as being
resign
Quaker,
for his sins. Jim is not into the Quakers, even though you grew up in Quaker Central down there.
I went to Quaker school, and I am totally into it, even though I'm not a spiritual kind of person.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of it's a lot of anti-war activism, that kind of stuff with the Quakers too. But I can't imagine you sitting for an hour silently in a room.
I can't imagine any of the three of us sitting in a room silently for an hour.
Yeah.
I did. I was thinking other things. In any case, we're talking to Meredith Goldstein. I was.
Okay. This is a great story, the column that you did about people constantly on their telephone when you're trying to interact with them. Tell us about this piece.
It's so bad that they call this concept fubbing.
Which I never heard about.
Which is like you are snubbing someone with your phone, so you are fubbing them. And I am guilty of fubbing, and I have been fubbed, and I think that we're all so much on our phones anyway, and that we've stopped noticing when someone is literally sitting, looking at us, waiting for us, and we're just like scrolling. And
it's bad.
And someone basically wrote in, and this was the second technology problem I'd had in like a week. Somebody else never took their earbuds out, right? So in this case, it was like just this issue of like, how am I supposed to engage with someone when they are fully not engaged? So I thought a lot. It made me really think about my own life and who I ignore. I actually, brought a family member today, and I know we took the tea here, and I was like on my phone, I'm sure half the time. So I think it's just like something. But what's interesting is right before I received this letter, I had been doing some research about fubbing, and I had talked to someone about a study where women are more negatively affected by this than men. And this was a very specific study about work, that it affects, that women were more likely to report being negatively affected in their creativity at work when they are, avoided at home or ignored at home because somebody's on their phone. I have some theories about this. Like, I always get a little bit like, meh, when people gender these studies. But I feel like if the person ignoring you who's on their phone is also not doing housework, not doing parenting, that may affect you too. So it's hard to know what's the phone and what's just like lack of involvement.
Yeah, but forget the phone for a second. It seems to me that it's just another form of ignoring the person you're with. And if you're ignoring the person you're with, let's say it's not a phone. If someone wrote to you and said, by the way, my partner hasn't talked to me in 3 weeks, for whatever reason, wouldn't you say there's something like seriously amiss there? Maybe you got to think about.
Totally. But the fact that it's so normal, right? Like if I just stop talking to the two of you and just stand here, it's super weird, right? But if I'm with a friend at dinner and I see that my phone has gone off and I pick it up and I look, we're kind of used to that because it could be important, because we're too used to it. In some cases, in some families, and in some units, that's not okay. But I think I am shocked, especially when I'm out with Globe friends, like it's not weird at all for somebody to pick up their phone and turn away.
In the middle of your conversation.
Usually there's a whoops, like I got, it's my editor, it's my whatever, or it's nothing. But I think it's like this habit, right? And we're used to accepting it, but it doesn't feel great.
Next time you go out to dinner, look at all the people with their phones on the table. They may not be actually talking on them, but they've got their phones on the table. ready
Look,
for...
don't look at me. Excuse me. We went to a Chinese restaurant to prepare for a show. Someone was not like on their phone at the next table, but talking on their phone at the next table. Who went over to them and politely said, "I'd appreciate it if you'd stop doing the phone thing"?
Was that you?
No, he went over and
Oh,
said...
you did.
I did.
Yeah.
I did it very politely.
No,
I mean, that's fine,
but I'm
too.
saying
Right?
people do that when they go out, and it's kind of sad, I think.
I mean, my new thing is that my significant other does not like it when people have a conversation with a friend outside on speakerphone with their phone while
It drives
walking.
me.
Yes.
I'm with him. It drives me. You don't.
I'm a little bit like, I know I don't like it. I don't like it. But when they're like walking around Jamaica Pond, and I'm like, what's the difference between that and them walking with somebody next to them? But I understand there is a difference.
What is the point of walking around Jamaica Pond if you're on your damn phone?
Because
whether
you're burning
it's a
calories.
loudspeaker or
You
not.
see it all the time. All the time. You see people on their phones with their earbuds, talking while they're walking, talking while they're jogging. talking while
Earbuds
they're
is
on
one
their
thing,
bikes.
but on speakers, so
speakers,
other
yeah,
people
So what do
are
you tell
listening.
these people who were victims of phubbing and earbudding?
That it's really bad. That, like not to, well, also like not to downplay it. I think we're
Well,
so
this
used
was
to.
with a kid too. This is a
Yes.
little baby, right?
So yeah, you really have to like.
No, there was a baby. The baby was not phubbing.
The
or
baby
being
was not on
phubbed.
the baby was not on the cell phone. But
Right.
from my
The
memory,
father
yes,
was
and that
on
was with the earbud.
earbuds.
I mean, to me, like if you think this is bad, it is quite bad, and we're allowed to call it that. I think that's the thing, which is that just because we're used to it and it's become sort of socially normal, that doesn't make it okay.
Okay, so
Listen
can
to
we?
what Zoe said, our producer.
What'd she say? I didn't see it.
She's telling on her parents. She said she has to tell her parents to get off their phones during dinner constantly. They're like deep in Instagram reels watching cat videos.
That's not true. Is that really true?
mid-meal.
She's nodding.
Yeah, I don't think it's age specific. I mean,
hope
I
they're
will
not
tell
listening
you
to the show.
that
They're
They
listening
do.
to the show.
It's
She's
good.
delivering
What?
them a message.
I was going to say, my friend Mark, who, as you know, is, I believe, 12 years older than me, is way more likely to be scrolling on his phone when I'm talking to him.
Would that
than
be the Mark we all know?
That is the Mark Shanahan. I think
Mark
he's
Shanahan from the
a
Boston
because
Globe.
he's like kind of like on social media more than I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
While you're talking to him, he's scrolling through his phone.
Oh, also definitely I can tell that when I am talking to him on the phone, he is probably also scrolling.
That's fabulous.
Yes,
That's
I'm accusing without evidence, but I'm sure I'm right.
shouldn't stop you. Yeah, another thing you wrote about. Not only am I sort of obsessed with your work, but what's that thing that's in the Sunday magazine about people get thrown together? What's that date?
Oh, Dinner with Cupid?
Okay.
So I do not set those people up. People have asked. There's a
I know
whole
you
other
don't.
section.
I know it's
yeah.
a whole other thing. But what drives me nuts about that, you address in response to a letter, is every time these people go out, they describe the greatest date, fabulous person, I love this woman, I love
Yeah.
this man, or I love this person. And then the final line says, no chemistry on the first date, so I'm not calling him back. You address this whole issue of chemistry on the first date thing. What does
So,
that even mean?
I don't. It means different things for different people. The person who wrote in is going on a lot of first dates and hearing, I didn't feel chemistry.
Yeah.
And he's saying to me, how much are you supposed to feel? I don't know, is the answer. But what I do know is sometimes when you really feel chemistry on a first date, when you're like, this is the best date of my life, I think that can be like a whoa. That might not actually be sustainable. Sometimes it is. I do know people who are like, the first time I met them, I knew. Well, good for them, right? For most people, it's like I might do this again. Or I'm still thinking about this 2 hours later. Like, I could kind of... That to
Don't
me...
you think it means I'm not sexually attracted to this person? That's what I always think it means.
Yeah, but like also I feel like a lot of the people in the world are not going to be super hot for somebody date one. So, or maybe they're like, nah, I might kiss that, but also maybe not. I don't know. The problem with first dates, I think, also is that you're bringing your own baggage to that date. So like, this is why I loved, well, so much of the pandemic is all terrible, right? And these things about how we engaged with each other to stay emotionally afloat. Some of them were habits we could keep. But this idea that you could FaceTime someone or have a Zoom date first, it was so important because
That's
so
a great
often you're
point.
like
That's
running
great
to a
point.
date, you're tired, you just got off the tea, you're gross, you don't like the food at the restaurant. And so you're bringing that, it's like, it just covers the lens of a date. So like how much chemistry can you have with someone when you're like, I don't know, like sweaty and tired?
So do people do that? Do people intentionally do a Zoom thing to
I
start?
think where that would have been unheard of pre-pandemic, well, we didn't even have Zoom, right? Most of us. Now, it's not the weirdest thing to be like, hey, do you want to FaceTime for like 10 minutes? It kind of cuts down the time of like, if that's nice, then going out can feel that much more intimate.
Okay, can we revisit a prior podcast
Yes.
of yours that meant a lot to us?
Always.
As you know, we're very fond. Well, let me ask you a question first. Do you know what an upside-down pineapple is?
I do know what an
Okay,
upside
but
down
did you know what it was a week ago?
She
Yes,
does.
I do.
Okay.
I
So-
do. It's part of the job.
Okay, so
I have
here-
never turned a pineapple upside down, not that you asked, but I do know what it is.
Okay, so we'll explain why we did this. You did this beautiful thing with Christopher Muther, the travel writer for The Globe,
yes,
who was incredibly open about his whole life and relationships. Here's just a little piece of Chris's discussion with Maris on Love Letters podcast, talking about the early days dating his now husband, Alex. Here it is.
One of the things that endeared Alex to me was it was like an early date. He came over to my place and we were going to cook. I was sitting in the living room. He's facing the cabinets. He's cutting something. And I said, I should probably tell you something before we have more dates. I said, I'm bipolar. And then he was just quiet for 5 minutes. And I thought, well, this is the litmus test. And he turned around and said, that's fine.
He's like Catherine Zeta-Jones?
That would have been amazing.
Okay, so we get this one impression of this incredibly lovely human being, Christopher Muther. And then 2 days ago, and he's with us, I think, yesterday or the day before, upside down pineapples, hanging out with frisky couples, and wordlessly dancing with a woman he didn't know for an hour on the Virgin Cruise. Is that a different Christopher Muther?
No, can't. We contain multitudes. We can have an upside down pineapple. We can have an incredibly intimate moment with our spouse to be. There's so many things we can be.
What is an upside down pineapple for the uninitiated?
So it is a sign that you are open to some stuff. Like you're open to some things outside of your primary relationship. I think it can mean different things to different people. But
did you know what an upside down pineapple was before the other day?
No, I did not, but apparently
But I think it was like a grocery store thing, right? Like you put it also in like if you go around the grocery store, you actually put, that's...
And you're in the grocery store and you turn a pineapple upside down?
Years and years ago, probably early in my Love Letters career, I was with a friend, I think, who said, let's just what if we just... And I was like I didn't get it, and then I got it. So
that means you're trying to pick up somebody at the grocery store?
Yeah, like
in the frozen
you're
food aisle?
open to being open.
Really?
Yeah.
And what happened to your friend?
Well, we didn't do that.
We did. Oh, you didn't do it?
We didn't know. It was
okay.
like we could, and I didn't understand
So this is a widely recognized symbol.
I do not think if I went to the Trader Joe's nearby that if I turned the pineapple upside down that people would sort of... No, I think for people who are looking, certainly. But I think there's also
How do you turn the pineapple upside down?
It's got all the... turn it upside
down.
Don't
even try like you don't know.
It's not cut up.
Come on.
It's just the pineapple.
A whole pineapple, but it's on its leaves. Right?
You just
you prop them out, open it, it sits there.
You prop it up, okay.
I like that that's your biggest worry about this. How am I going to get the pineapple to
stay upright?
Yeah.
I'm very big into pineapples, as Jim knows.
I know, but you like them perfectly right.
I didn't know about the upside down thing, but maybe this is a new adventure for us all.
I just think there's also mythology, depending on the geography of where you are, about who is open to, whether it's swinging, open relationships. There was a neighborhood in Maryland I used to live near where people said, oh, well, if they have white gravel in the driveway. Everybody had white gravel in the driveway. Everyone did. That's how the neighborhood was built.
You were a swinger if you had white gravel in the driveway?
Some friend told me this, and I was like, this is like urban legend that does not shake out.
Speaking of white gravel, have you been following the political evolution of the Villages in Florida?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
You know this? I mean, for those who don't know, the Villages is this place where it's an old age thing that is STD city for the most part, a lot of stuff going on, that is totally rock-ribbed Republican, and all of a sudden, scores, if not hundreds, of people are riding around in little golf carts with Harris signs on it.
Yeah, people, I mean, I think I cannot. I am, the political landscape of Florida is like a mystery that I am certainly not going to solve, but it's been interesting to watch.
We're talking to Meredith Goldstein from the Boston Globe.
Okay, Meredith Goldstein from the Boston Globe. Tell us about your searching for people for your next event. The
next podcast.
Next season. So I really wanted to get down to a big question about whether or not people can change. And if they have changed even against their will, how that happened. And so we think about change for the better, becoming a nicer person, becoming a better partner. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about menopause and perimenopause and how that may change you without you really opting into that, where suddenly you don't like the things you used to like. And so I am looking for stories of change. And already I'm just finding people are really open about how they are altered in good and different ways.
And how do people reach out to you?
They could email me. They can just go to boston.com/loveletters, but I'm always available. I'm real easy to find. I'm meredith.goldstein@globe.com.
What are the good things that happen with perimenopause and menopause?
What are the good things?
Yeah.
I mean,
usually you hear about the bad things.
People have told me there's a lot of clarity. There's a lot of less room for feeling bad about how you actually feel. And also, like, sometimes it actually, for people, has changed the chemistry that wasn't working before. So I'm still getting a lot of stories, but it is amazing to me. We're also in this phase, right, where we talk about perimenopause in a way that we never talked about it before. So I have 32-year-old women being like, is this perimenopause? Because they're reading about it, and it may not be. They might just
Isn't the huge book, Miranda July, about a perimenopausal woman, right?
Yes.
Everybody I know that's read that loved it.
Yeah, I'm like afraid to read it at 47. Like, it might break my brain, but I'm going to. I know I'm going to love it.
But you usually hear about people with their night sweats and they have to wear 17 layers of clothes because they're having hot flashes and because they're not interested in sex anymore. You don't hear good things generally.
I'd read this book if I were you, Marjorie.
And I'm hearing. I am hearing.
But she's a young person. Right?
I am hearing some good things, and also like I'm hearing the variety of things, which is we think about the things we see in movies like hot flashes, and I'm hearing about things that we'd never think of. And for me, I know,
what?
I think my thing, and I have no way to prove that this is, I am forgetting the names of objects, and I have a very good memory, and my recall for certain names of things is like, I'm like, oh, this is what happened to my mother, where she like forgot the name of an actor, forgot the name of and I'm like, was that perimenopause? And then it came back, right? Like, it all comes back. So I'm hoping that the fact that I just had to think about the fact that that is a chair. It's definitely a chair. That's the name of that. You know, maybe it's perimenopause, maybe it's summer. Who knows?
By the way, the Miranda July book is called All Fours. And it is unbelievable.
Yes. My daughter just finished it.
Yeah,
She
she's
said it was
unbelievable.
very well written. Yeah. A lot of activity.
Okay, so as soon as you depart in a few minutes, we're going to talk about another issue you addressed.
Yeah.
Which is the burning question of, well, that's a pun, actually, it turns out. What is the issue that many people have thought about in their lives about your house is burning and?
Do I take the dog or do I take my husband?
Exactly, that is the issue. Fill in a few blanks for us.
I mean, well, I had a letter writer write in and say, is there something wrong with me? Because at the end of the day, my now ex was never that important. That the people in my life are not that, my dog is important. And does that make me a bad person, a human that can't connect? And the truth is, throughout the letter, you realize this is a person who can connect. She has an incredibly close relationship with her sister. It just might not be that romance doesn't sound like her thing. And I think the world tells us that romance is primary, and yet it so often isn't in our actual day-to-day lives. So I think if you love your sister and your dog, that's amazing, and you're just fine. But if the building is burning, grab everybody.
Yeah, grab everybody. Well, I was thinking before, I mean, we're going to talk after, just not the burning building thing.
With our listeners.
Yeah, are you more attached to your dog, to your spouse, or your children? I mean, where are you?
Don't include the children in this thing. A dog versus partner is the issue. Because everybody's going to feel they have to say, who's not going to say it? Other than that guy that wrote the piece, the NPR guy, who said, I sort of regret having my child, we discussed yesterday. Yeah. What person's going to call here and say, I regret having my children?
Of teenagers. That's what I would say. A parent of teenagers, they might be.
I think people might say that now in retrospect about an ex. Like the letter writer.
That's right. Well, he was the almost ex. He was living in the house.
Yeah, he was still living in the house. That sounds like a nice guy.
And he had a girlfriend someplace else. That was quite the tolerant situation there, I guess. And she's waiting until he can interest rates come down. Is that what she's doing?
That's the real story, right? Exes living together as they wait for interest rates to come down.
Yeah, okay. All right, so when does the podcast start up again?
We're going to, in a few months, you've got a few months, and hopefully we'll drop some bonus episodes for you.
Well, you do have a good bonus episode. That poor woman that had the husband that only lasted 2 months.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a real tearjerker.
Yeah. Listen, hopefully they make you feel good too.
By the way, we don't have time to talk about it because we're out of time. But you wrote a great piece about Kate Pearson from the B-52s.
Yes, who's coming next week.
People should. Yeah, but explain
she's performing. Kate Pearson of the B-52s lives on the Cape now half the year. This makes me feel Truro. She's wonderful. She's performing next week. If you Google her, you'll figure it out. But Love Shack, etc.
She's great.
It never gets old.
She has a great piece, too. Good to see you, Meredith.
Good to see you, too.
Thank you very much, Meredith Goldstein. I haven't called you Meredith Vieira in a long time.
No, but thank you for saying it now. At least we got one in.
Okay. We've been talking with Meredith Goldstein, Boston Globe Love Letters advice columnist, host of the Love Letters podcast. Thank you very much, Meredith.
Good to see you.
Up next, we're going to open the lines to bring you into the conversation about who you're more likely to save in a fire. But let's broaden it from beyond the fire. I mean, who are you more fond of? Is it the dog or the spouse? And maybe throw in the teens, even though Jim doesn't want to. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming online at youtube.com.
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, if history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes, by way of plays in place. The production company stages historic events where they happened. In their latest production, that's the speech abolitionist Angelina Grimke delivered at the State House. Then we head to the North End for this year's Fisherman's Feast. And finally, Marcia Lindsay, principal bartender at SRV, serves up sage advice on summer drinks. That's today on The Culture Show at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And the Adventure Park at Heritage Museums and Gardens. Zip line and climbing trails for all ages, 7 days a week this summer, rain or shine. More at myadventurepark.com. And South Coast
Public Radio, Jim Browdy and Marge Regan, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. So just to wrap up the prior conversation, upside down pineapple, in certain parts of the country, white gravel, and what did someone just text you?
2 Adirondack chairs in the front yard.
Means what?
That you're open to being a swinger, I guess.
Well, there you go.
Who knew that?
Well, we know it now. We're closing today out with, we ordinarily would do Am I the A-hole, because Marjorie won't be here today. We don't want to miss this. But as we discussed with, as Marjorie calls her, Meredith Vieira Goldstein a few minutes ago, who would you save in a fire, the dog or the husband? We talked about one woman's morbid realization. She doesn't think she'll ever love a man more than her dogs. Can you relate? Has it caused domestic strife? Have you shared that reality with your partner? The number is 877-301-8970. The question is simple. I don't know why you'd hesitate to call. If your house was burning down, who would you save, the dog or the man? The number is 877-301-8970.
I keep telling you, that's not a fair question.
What is a fair question?
Because the dog wouldn't know enough to get out. So you have to save the dog.
What if the husband's sleeping?
You just yell at him to get up and get going or something like that. But listen to this. This is from Sue and Charlotte. They're co-owners of something called the Kettlebones Dog Treats in Danvers. And here's what Sue says. We have a unique perspective on the upcoming segment of 2 people who love their dogs more than their husbands. As retirement years were in our near future and the prospect of looking lovingly at our husbands' faces 24/7, the panic set in. We did the only thing that women in their 60s do. We started a dog treat business because who doesn't love their dogs more than their husbands and or kids? There's an honest woman. They're doing something in Dewey Square, but it's running off the page, so I can't tell you what it is.
The number is 877-301-8970. Don on the road says, no contest, wouldn't think twice. I would save my goldfish first, Donna said.
Oh, yeah. There's one right after that. If there was a fire at GBH, would people save Jim or Marjorie? That's a good one, too.
Okay.
I think a lot of people, they're very attached to their dogs. I have a dear friend of mine who just lost her dog. It's a terrible tragedy. I have paintings all over my house of my late dog.
You were on the front page, front page of the Boston Globe with Harry the P, best dog from C to C, on your lap lovingly. Remember what the comments were like on that, the story?
The comments at the Herald were just brutal.
Rather disgusting.
I didn't read them.
I
didn't read them. But that was the time that movie Marley and Me came out.
I remember that.
Remember that was with Owen Wilson? It was about I think was it a lab? Was it a lab or a golden retriever? I don't know. But in any case, that was a total tearjerker. Everybody loves Golden Retriever, thank you very much. It was a terrific tearjerker movie. And Brian McGroy, who I have a guest all the time, he's the head of the BU Journalism School. He used to be editor of the Boston Globe.
I heard that, yeah.
I mean, why somebody didn't make a romance, one of those romance comedy things, romantic comedy, whatever you call them, out of his book about how a rooster
made me a family man.
Maybe a family man. That was all about how when his dog was dying, his vet
soon-to-be partner
came to his house to administer the let's put the dog down medication, and then he fell in love with his vet. Great
Numbers,
story.
877-301-8970. Let's make it simple. Dog or the husband, assuming you got to make a choice. Let's go to Vivian and Natick. Vivian, you got to wait a second because Marjorie's having a little explosion
Evan
here.
Waterchild said his wife just answered the question. She said she'd say the laptop.
Vivian and Natick, thank you for calling. We appreciate it. Vivian.
Hi, everyone. Second time calling.
Thank you for doing it.
Yeah. So, I love the show. My mom is visiting from Brazil. She's listening to the show, but she doesn't understand anything. But I asked her the question. Mm-hmm. And she said, obviously, the dog, because the husband can save himself.
Exactly.
The funny fact is that my mom is widowed again, second time. And we keep asking her, is she going to bury the next husband? So obviously the dog is more important. considering that she has never had a dog in her life.
There you go.
Hey, Vivian, are you going to tell your mother what you just said?
Yeah, I will tell her in Portuguese.
I hope you do. Vivian,
Okay.
thank you for the call. We appreciate it.
We have dogs
Everybody's
right
killing
down
the
the
husband,
line.
right?
I would save the dog because all the men in my life have been dogs. I want to save the obedient one. And then dog, without a doubt, she wants nothing from me other than my presence. Everyone else sucks the life out of me, and the expectations of marriage and husbands are just ridiculous.
This is good.
21 years, and I am so over it. He's a great guy, but the dog.
877-301-8970 is the number.
Here's Lynn in Plymouth. Dog or spouse? It depends on their age. Take the dog. They always look at you joyfully. Lynn in Plymouth. There you go. 877-301-8970 is the number to call, and you can tell us how you feel about the husband, the dog. Well, we could go both ways here. The spouse, the dog.
I think it's very different. The man well, I don't know if it is different. That's a very good question. Your point was it could be a partner of whatever gender. Is that your point?
It could be a partner of whatever
I guess that's probably
gender.
true.
But here's a texter who says...
But don't you think that wives are much more fed up with their husbands than vice versa, or no? I do.
That's probably true.
That's
probably true. Wives are much more concerned about other things. And I think husbands basically care about...
Like relationships.
What's for dinner.
Exactly.
I mean, isn't that kind of the thing with husbands? They care about what's for dinner.
Too, yeah.
And here's a texter who says, I wouldn't have a choice. My husband would insist that the dog and I get out before him. So there's a nice one, but there aren't many of them. Yeah. Okay, Dano and Dudley, love my wife dearly, but I'm pretty sure she would lock me and the dog in the house. She wouldn't take either, and that's terrible. That's terrible.
You want to take a call?
Sure.
Okay, 877-301-8970. Tell us where to go back in Brighton whenever you're... Maria in Pembroke, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Hi, Maria. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
We're good, thank you.
So my son-in-law always jokes that my husband and I will never agree on a divorce because neither one of us would give up the dog.
That's right. You have to share custody. That's right. Maria, thank you.
So wait, what choice would you make if you were faced with the choice, Maria, the dog or the guy?
You know what? My husband came down 5 years ago with leukemia.
Oh.
And we actually in Boston right now because it has returned.
Oh.
So for me, that would be a hard question to answer.
Well, Maria, we wish your husband and you a huge amount of good luck in the future and wish him wellness. And thank you for talking to us. We really appreciate it. Maria from Pembroke. 877-301-8970.
Woody, the UPS driver, says, I have been in this situation, and I did exactly what my wife would have done. Save the puppy first.
Now, let's talk about you and your dog. I mentioned the photograph, which was a lovely photograph.
That's
was
right.
it Christmas time you wrote this?
Christmas time. It was because the movie Marley and Me came out.
What's that guy's name? The Marley
Owen.
and Me.
Owen.
No, the guy
Wilson.
who wrote the book, who was huge.
Oh, I don't remember.
He's a radio guy, too. We'll think of his name in a second. But beyond this, how about your relationship? No, I don't think so.
Wasn't John Grogan?
I don't think so.
I don't know who did
it. Was John Grogan? My
know.
apologies. Thank you. How about you and your... How close were you to that dog?
Very
Tell
close.
people. Like very close.
Yeah, very close.
Like very close.
My best relationship ever with the dog.
Is that... Are you saying that for a fact?
No, I shouldn't say
No,
that.
don't mention your kids. We're not talking about your kids. Was it a good relationship?
Who does not have a good relationship with their dog? Unless you've got some kind of lunatic, crazy, bad dog that bites or something. I think most people are very attached to their dog. Like I said, I just had a friend who lost her dog. Devastated. I mean, it takes a long time to get over it because your dog is so loyal. Your dog is always happy to see you.
Unequivocal,
your dog
as they
is
say.
ready to go. You put the leash on. The dog is thrilled. Let's go out. Let's strut around the neighborhood. Dogs are great, and I think that's why there's no bad moods in dogs.
By the way, if you put a leash on the husband and walk around the neighborhood, things are generally that goes well too. Shirley in Littleton, you're next. Hi.
It's Charlotte.
Charlotte, we are really botching it today. Our apologies, Charlotte, but
That's okay.
We mean well here.
That's
Go
okay.
ahead, Charlotte.
I wrote a poem about my last dog, and I said a good dog is like a good marriage, but with less misunderstanding and more forgiveness.
That's for. Do you have the poem handy?
I do not, I'm sorry to say.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
The other thing, I didn't come up with this. I'm sorry I can't attribute it to its author, but I read a long time ago about forgiveness and dogs. Lock your spouse and your dog in your car trunk for half an hour and see who's happy to see you when you let them out.
That's pretty good, Charlotte. Thank you very much. That's a good one. Thank you for the call. Appreciate it.
Here's a texter who is joking, but said, my spouse would set the fire.
That's really, that shouldn't even have been
It's
read.
not very nice. Well,
that's really nice.
I guess things are not going well in that particular marriage. Felicity in the car, what do you think?
Hello, Felicity.
Hi there.
Hey.
I've always had dogs. I love them very much.
Mm-hmm.
But I would save my husband first, because if I went to save my husband, I could call the dog and he would come with me.
That's a very good point.
So that's a little practical is the problem.
Yeah.
Felicity, thank you for your call. That's like your practical analysis, that the reason you'd save the dog is because the dog doesn't know enough to save itself, as opposed to the fact, what are you laughing about?
Here's a texter.
Okay.
This topic scares me because I think of this often. Too often. Would it be Paisley or me? I don't want to know, says Bob from Ipswich.
Okay, that's an honest man there. Sadly, an honest man. 877-301-8970. What?
Joel in Connecticut wants to know who would you take to the gravel pit, and that, of course, is a joke about Kristi Noem, the governor of. I always forget if it's South Dakota or North Dakota.
I think it's North Dakota.
I don't know what she is.
She's the one who shot her dog in the head.
Yeah, she's the one that
she's bragging about it in her
the
book.
dog to the. Well, that threw her out of contention. You know, people were saying, "Oh, we do these kinds of things out here in South Dakota." That was it. Even Donald Trump said he wasn't going to have somebody's vice president who shot the dog right after she killed a goat right before that.
Read what Brian and Marblehead texted, Marjorie. I think it's better you read it.
The cat first, then the dog, and then Jim.
877-301-8970. Ruth in Somerville, hello there.
Hey, guys.
Hi.
Long-time listener, third-time caller.
We really appreciate it.
You guys, I would definitely have to wake my husband up first because he would need to get one of the cats and I'd get the other cat.
Well, that's another practical thing, too.
Okay.
Right.
But if you had somebody else, if you had somebody else to carry the cat, would you wake him up? Exactly. That's. I think that pause sort of answered our question there, Ruth. That takes care of that. What else did you want to say, Ruth? Yeah, you were going to say something. Yeah.
I wanted to say that you were talking to Meredith about for perimenopause and premenopause and menopause.
Yep.
I just turned 54, and I've been, having all these different. Is it gray? There's gray hair. I'm a little warm, and no one else seems to be hot. My hair got curly, and I keep thinking to myself the old Maybelline commercial. Maybe she is born with it. Maybe it's Maybelline. Maybe it's menopause.
Oh, my God, Ruth. That's
a
big
fine
one.
call there, Ruth. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, there were all the jokes about women having hot flashes where you have to dress in layers. You have to
take them off?
So if things get hot in the office, you can take. That was when people still went to the office. You could take off the layers, and when you got chilly, you can put the layers back on. You had to have several layers of outfits to cope with your menopausal symptoms.
Did you do that?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I did that.
You don't remember that far back?
No, I don't remember that far back. Mary from Shrewsbury. What do you think, Mary?
Hey, Mary.
Hi. We made a deal that he would get the dogs and I would get the cars.
I love it. Okay.
Wait, is that like a prenup or what was that, Mary?
No, we decided, I said, I'll smell it. You get out of bed and get those dogs. I want the dogs out. I'll get the car.
Fair enough. Thank you very much, Mary, for the card. By the way, an anonymous text that says the leash on the husband might send some upside-down pineapple signals. That's probably, it's actually a different kind of thing.
This is from Jay in the Semi. I don't even have a dog, but in the event of a fire, I would go next door and make sure my neighbor's dog was safe. It's not easy to be married. I think that's the bottom. I think that's the bottom line here. It is not.
Is that horrible that we laughed at that? It is horrible, right?
I think
that was very funny.
That's why when you say these people that say they've been married for 30 and 40, 50 years, you have to say that's very commendable because it's not easy.
Beautiful thing.
Olivia from Providence. What do you think, Olivia?
Hello, Olivia. Olivia.
Hi, Olivia. You there?
Oh, yep, I'm here.
What's up?
So I work in a funeral home.
Sure.
And so death is something that I deal with every day.
Yeah.
And I'm a dog lover. I have 2 of my own and no kids. So I would think that I would do anything for my dog. But when I looked in the face of people who have lost ones that they love, I can guarantee you not a single one of them would not trade their dog in exchange for another few weeks with the one they lost.
Oh.
Well, that's a great and hopeful sentiment, Olivia. I think what we're discovering here is that
she doesn't know our listeners. That's what we're discovering.
A lot of our listeners aren't that fond of their spouse.
I think people don't realize.
Yeah.
I think people don't realize until they are faced with that.
That's probably true.
I would think I could say I would choose my dog over my husband, but when my husband lost consciousness while driving and was in a terrible car accident, I wasn't thinking about my dogs at all. All I could think about was he was okay.
Okay, well, you totally humiliated us. Thank you, Olivia. We appreciate the call. I mean, let's hope that Olivia's right. I don't know if she is.
I don't know.
Let's hope she's right.
Here's Ben from Peabody.
What do you say?
I cried more when our dog passed away than when my Jewish mother passed away.
That's really, these are really vicious people.
We got a tough crowd out here. We have a tough crowd.
This is really, it's very sad. So do you ever take one of your great skills, by the way, Marjorie, and I mean this
is sum it all up?
You have the ability to sum up things when we're talking to our listeners in ways that others cannot do. So do you think is there a trend? Is there something you can take away from this?
Well, I think we had a few lovely people like Olivia who just called, and she said, she's dealt with grief all the time, and people are heartbroken when someone that they love dies. But I think it'd be fair to say that the 80% of the people that listen to this show, Jim, love the pets.
Well, the guy that said I'm going to drive to another state to save a dog there first, or whatever he said, I think spoke for far too many people.
He didn't say he was going to drive
to another
state.
He said he'd drive somewhere else.
Next door. He'd go next door to make sure the dogs were safe in the house next door.
We brought out the worst in people, which is, I think, pretty much what we do here.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's it,
We're
Marjorie.
done. Okay, thank you very much for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. We're going to be back here on Friday at the Boston Public Radio.
Library, we call it.
Library, that's right.
That's right.
Keep up with us 24/7 way of our podcast, which is a 3-hour podcast of the whole show. We have a half-hour podcast of the highlights of the show. Tomorrow, we're going to be joined by NBC's Chuck Todd, retired federal judge Nancy Gertner, food policy analyst Corby Kummer, tech guru Andy Anatko, and Embrace Boston CEO Amari Paris Jeffries. We want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss. Additional support from Ariana Gonzalez, our engineer, John LeClaw Parker, our executive producer, Jamie Bologna. We want to thank our staff down here at the Boston Public Library. That would be Matt